Chapter 2185. It was because of Huang Jinyuan's fear that Yang Hongwu had an opportunity to take advantage of. Facing Huang Jinyuan, Yang Hongwu curled his lips into a smile and said in an arrogant tone, "You have something that I want, which can help me break through the shackles. If you can return the space attribute treasure of fate in your body to me, I will return it to you. If you can give me the Tao grade spiritual root, I can spare your life." Hearing Yang Hongwu's words, Huang Jinyuan's expression changed drastically. The space was familiar with the supreme treasure of fortune, so it wasn't strange for others to know about it. However, it was strange for an aboriginal to know about it. In addition, the sapling of the ancient golden tree in his inner world was also destroyed by him. How could Huang Jinyuan not be shocked when he knew about it? One had to know that no one knew about this matter. Not even his own master knew about it. It could be said that this was his greatest secret. However, this aboriginal in front of him, who was only a weak ruler, knew about it. How could he not be shocked? If only his space attribute ultimate creation treasure had been leaked, he would have suspected that someone had leaked his whereabouts and betrayed him. However, the fact that the sapling of the ancient golden tree was known to others was a different matter altogether. It was impossible that someone had leaked it. It was because of this aboriginal in front of him. He must have something that could detect his inner world. He had never heard of any treasure that could detect the treasures in other people's inner worlds. Unless it was a great being at the level of a universe overlord, the other party would have to pay a price to do so. The kid in front of him was only at the ruler level. It was impossible for him to do so. As for treasures that could detect other people's inner worlds, there were too few of them. He did not doubt that there was such a treasure, but he was sure that he had never seen it before. Therefore, the possibility of this was too small. Since this possibility was very small, it meant that there was another possibility. There was a terrifying great being guarding this kid, guarding this aboriginal. If that was the case, then he was really in danger. No wonder this kid was not afraid when he saw him, even though he was only at the ruler level. Even after his identity was exposed, he did not panic at all. This kid's backer was really incredible. At this point, he was already regretting. He regretted provoking this guy. However, at this point, it was too late to regret. He had already provoked this guy. What he was thinking now was that if there was really a universe overlord behind this young man, then what he hoped the most was that the overlord behind this young man was not in this part of the universe. There were indeed universe overlords in this universe, but they weren't the best. Besides, he had to deal with the invasions from other universes. In that case, it was impossible for this overlord to come here with his true body. In that case, he still had a chance. However, it would not be easy for him to obtain the items on this kid's body and seize his devouring path. "Brat, you sure talk big. A mere dominator realm cultivator dares to have designs on me? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Although Huang Jinyuan's thoughts and ideas had changed countless times, only a moment had passed. It was just a moment. At this moment, he had already made a decision. Whether or not this kid had a universe overlord behind him, he had to give it a try. After all, once he succeeded, he would gain too much. The devouring path was one of the oldest, most terrifying, and most powerful great paths. Even if he had to take some risks, it would be enough. As long as he obtained the devouring Tao, he would be able to escape into the void. At that time, it would not be difficult for the overlord of this universe to find him. After all, the space attribute artifact that he was carrying was a space attribute artifact. It was not that easy to transform into a true treasure. If it was not for his insufficient comprehension of the great path of space, he would not have had any worries at all. At this moment, he looked at Yang Hongwu, his eyes full of greed. His murderous intent began to boil. Seeing this, Yang Hongwu narrowed his eyes. Yang Hongwu was very sensitive to murderous intent. He did not expect this guy, who was very wary of him just a moment ago, to suddenly change his mind. He actually wanted to kill him directly. Good Lord, could it be that he had seen through his scheme? Yang Hongwu did not think so. However, the time he had bought was enough. At this moment, the power of curse and hellfire on Mu He and Mu Lien completely erupted. The two of them let out shrill screams. In the next moment, Zi Xintong, Zheng Qiushuang, and Lu Yu attacked at the same time. Their targets were none other than Mu He and Mu Lian. Under the joint attack of the three women, Mu He and Mu Lian had no room to resist. If the two of them were not injured, it would not be easy for the three women to deal with them. However, after the two of them were schemed against by Yang Hongwu, they were hit by Hellfire and the power of Curse. This was much easier. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan also moved. His target was not Mu He and Mu Lian. He did not plan to save them. Instead, he rushed towards Yang Hongwu. At that moment, he had already appeared in front of Yang Hongwu. It was his space attribute treasure that had erupted with the power of space. Yang Hongwu reacted just as quickly. Sensing the fluctuation of space attribute, Yang Hongwu also used the void travel technique to avoid Huang Jinyuan. Space Dao. Huang Jinyuan, who saw this scene, was even more shocked. He was already very shocked when he sensed Yang Hongwu's devouring Dao. Now, he simply could not believe what he was seeing. This aboriginal did not only possess the devouring Dao, but also the space Dao. It was very rare for a person to comprehend two great Daos, although it was not unheard of. However, to comprehend two such powerful great Daos was incredible. It was simply unheard of. Moreover, this aboriginal's cultivation was only at the ruler realm. It was simply impossible. Yet he had encountered it. He was aware of the danger. However, danger and opportunity coexisted. The stronger the aboriginal in front of him was, the more terrifying his talent was. For him, the greater the opportunity and benefit he would obtain. After all, his cultivation was only at the ruler realm. The gap between the ruler realm and the Dao Master realm was a huge gap, a gap that could not be crossed. Chapter 2186. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan looked at Yang Hongwu and said loudly, "Boy, I have to admit that your talent is really amazing. You've comprehended two great paths in the sovereign realm, and they're the top two great paths. However, your cultivation is too weak. Even if you've comprehended two great paths, your strength is still far from enough. If you surrender to me now and hand over the secret technique that you've comprehended two great paths, I can spare your life." His strong cultivation was where his confidence came from. "I wonder what you're relying on." Yang Hongwu looked at him coldly and said, "You won't be able to leave today. As for killing me, it's even more impossible. You don't even know that you're about to die. How sad." By this time, Mu He and Mu Lian had already been killed. Another avatar of Yang Hongwu appeared beside the two of them, and another cauldron appeared. This cauldron directly swallowed Mu He and Mu Lian. This scene made Huang Jinyuan, who was already very shocked, even more shocked. Clone technique. Moreover, this clone's strength was exactly the same as the original body. Even he couldn't tell the real one from the fake. This boy's strength was far from what he had seen. No wonder this boy had such strong confidence. Moreover, if he completely devoured and refined Mu He and Mu Lian with the devouring Dao, his strength would increase tremendously. Now, he was already so strong and shocking at the sovereign realm. If he were to raise his cultivation to the Dao Lord realm, would he not be able to compete with him? No, absolutely not. He couldn't let this continue. He couldn't let his cultivation continue to increase. Thinking of this, a cold light flashed in Huang Jinyuan's eyes. He rose into the air. In the sky, his hands bent slightly. Then, he bent his body slightly. In the next moment, he exploded. His two fists struck out, causing the space to tremble. This was one of the secret techniques that he was most proud of. Void-shaking fist. The power of space erupted with the power of the fist, forming a powerful spatial tremor that dealt a fatal blow to the enemy. Although he hadn't truly comprehended the great path of space, the power that erupted when combined with the space treasure in his hand was extremely strong. Ordinary Dao masters were no match for him at all. Therefore, many Dao venerates had died at his hands. Dao venerates were very rare, even in their great cosmos. As for great Dao masters, they were even rarer. In an ordinary great universe, if there were 10 great Dao masters, it would be considered a very powerful universe. Even in the ancient spirit Tao sect, other than their ancestor, the Golden Ancient Tree, their sect leader was the only great Tao master. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan wanted to end this battle as soon as possible. Although great beings at the level of universe overlords might not appear here, great Tao knights might not. If this aboriginal in front of him was someone valued by universe overlord, he must have a trump card and a protector. This protector was most likely a great Tao knight. At this moment, he didn't detect any aura of a great Tao master. This meant that this aboriginal's protector was still some distance away. However, for such a master, if he sensed that the genius he was protecting was in danger, he would rush to the genius's side as quickly as possible. This wouldn't take too much time. Therefore, he had to kill this native as fast as he could and seize his two great Taos. If he couldn't succeed, he would have to escape immediately. As for Mu He and Mu Lien, they were really good for nothings. They couldn't even pin down the three women. Right now, Huang Jinyuan was most worried about the three women. None of them were weak. Even the weakest one had reached the Tao Lord realm. Although she had just become a Tao Lord, the other two weren't weak at all. This was especially so for the first woman. Huang Jinyuan could sense that her aura wasn't any weaker than his. Moreover, he didn't know what trump card she had. Now, the three women were the furthest away from this aboriginal. This was also his best chance. If he couldn't succeed, the three women would intervene and protect this aboriginal. In that case, he wouldn't be able to kill or capture this aboriginal in a short time. Then, all his plans would fail. Therefore, Huang Jinyuan, who executed the space oscillation fist technique, didn't hold back in this attack. He unleashed his greatest strength. When his fist landed on Yang Hongwu's body, Huang Jinyuan laughed. He was incomparably happy. This brat was dead for sure. If he used that spatial secret technique to dodge again, he would really have to expend too much energy. However, this kid didn't dodge at all. Wasn't he courting death? Just as Yang Hongwu was about to be beaten to death, Huang Jinyuan was stunned. Yang Hongwu's figure was directly scattered. However, there was nothing in the void. What he had hit was only a shadow. Or rather, it was just a clone. Moreover, it only had a portion of energy. How is this possible? Huang Jinyuan was about to go crazy. He had expended all his strength in this attack, but it had only hit a clone. Was his vision so bad? This definitely couldn't be real. He was sure that the kid, just now, was the real body. Yang Hongwu smiled. On the other side, Yang Hongwu's other clone had already sent Mu He and Mu Lien's physical bodies into the common people's great world. After Mu He and Mu Lien's physical bodies were scattered and their flesh and blood merged into the common people's great world, it allowed the common people's great world to instantly receive a vast amount of spiritual energy. The entire common people's great world received a shocking increase. Although the laws didn't increase, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had already reached the densest level in the entire common people's great world. Within the common people's great world, many martial artists had already cultivated to the extreme. Some martial artists who had reached the end of their lifespan had actually obtained a lot of lifespan, allowing them to have a chance to improve further. There were even some martial artists who had already touched the boundary of the laws of the common people's great world. What did this mean? It meant that the common people's great world was constantly transforming and constantly improving. The common people's great world was improving, and Yang Hongwu's cultivation would also constantly improve. His strength would become even stronger. Nothing is impossible. At this moment, Yang Hongwu once again appeared in front of Huang Jinyuan. This time, it wasn't just one person, but three Yang Hongwus. These three Yang Hongwu stood in a triangle, surrounding Huang Jinyuan. Kid, I have to admit that I have underestimated you. However, this doesn't mean that you can really fight against me. Damn it, you still have to die. After Huang Jinyuan said this, he closed his eyes. His aura was constantly increasing, becoming more and more terrifying. Chapter 2187. At this moment, Yang Hongwu knew that Huang Jinyuan was ready to use his powerful secret technique. As the young master of a powerful sect, it was absolutely impossible for him to maintain his position if he did not have a trump card. The competition for the successor of any powerful sect was definitely not easy. It could even be said to be very bloody and cruel. Huang Jinyuan wanted to enhance his aura and let his power reach its peak, but this would also take some time. Yang Hongwu was not stupid enough to make such preparations at this time. Therefore, the moment Huang Jinyuan's aura began to increase, Yang Hongwu had already made his move. The three Yang Hongwus raised their hands at the same time. Intense energy fluctuations erupted from their palms. Ancient and mysterious hand seals were formed one after another. These hand seals gathered together, and in an instant, a powerful energy fluctuation appeared in the void. The entire space erupted with a dazzling radiance. A terrifying array formation soared into the sky. This array formation contained an ancient power. It was the power of an ancient being. This power seemed to be above the Great Path Law as it directly locked on a Huang Jinyuan. Huang Jinyuan was horrified when he felt this terrifying power locking onto him. How could he not be shocked when this power brought him the aura of death? He had a strong premonition that if he was hit by this power, there was absolutely no chance of him surviving. Huang Jinyuan's expression changed drastically. He did not dare to take the risk now. Run. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. He no longer had those arrogant thoughts. He only wanted to escape from this place as soon as possible and escape from that terrifying power. However, when he wanted to escape, he was shocked to discover that this space had actually been sealed. He couldn't sense the fluctuation of spatial laws. This was the most terrifying thing. He had a supreme treasure with spatial attributes in his hand. Even if he hadn't truly comprehended the profound mysteries of space, he couldn't sense the slightest fluctuation of space. This was too terrifying. This meant that the premonition he had earlier was absolutely possible. This aboriginal before him was simply too terrifying. He felt bitter in his heart. He should have known that a native who could comprehend two great Taoists wouldn't be so simple. Even though his cultivation was only at the ruler realm, his foundation was absolutely terrifying. Without sufficient strength, how could he possibly comprehend two great Taoists? Since ancient times, there were people who had comprehended two great Taoists. However, it was unheard of for someone to comprehend both the devouring Great Tao and the space Great Tao. It was almost impossible. And now, the native in front of him had done exactly that. Was he really a child of destiny? Was he the son of fate? No one knew. However, one thing was certain. He was definitely loved by the great cosmos, or an existence that the will of the great cosmos would be jealous of. This kind of person was not someone he could scheme against. It was too late to regret now. At this moment, he had no way out. Since there was no way out, he could only kill. He still had a chance of survival. As long as he killed this native before him, he would be able to seize his destiny and talent. Then, he would be able to soar into the sky and become the genius with the strongest destiny and most terrifying talent. His eyes were red as he stared at Yang Hongwu. His aura was still rising and had already reached its peak. Under normal circumstances, this would already be Huang Jinyuan's limit. However, at this moment, Huang Jinyuan knew that this wasn't enough. It was far from enough. He began to burn his own power and even his life force and lifespan. His bloodline power also started to burn. He was prepared to make the strongest gamble. He would either succeed or die trying. As long as he killed Yang Hongwu, everything would change. However, if he couldn't kill Yang Hongwu, he would most likely die here and become a stepping stone for this native to reach the pinnacle. He wasn't willing to become a stepping stone, so he had to fight and win and slay. At this moment, this was what Huang Jinyuan was thinking. How could Yang Hongwu not be the same? He wanted to live and even wanted to increase his strength. He wanted his common people's great world to evolve. He had to kill Huang Jinyuan. There was no need to doubt Huang Jinyuan's strength. Moreover, at this moment, Huang Jinyuan was burning his life force and his bloodline power. This was something Yang Hongwu had never expected. This also made Yang Hongwu speechless. This guy's cultivation was so much higher than his. Did he need to risk his life like this? Originally, Yang Hongwu had thought that even though he would have to pay a heavy price to kill Huang Jinyuan and even suffer serious injuries, he would still be able to defeat and kill him. However, from the looks of it now, this fellow did not conserve his strength like he had imagined. Instead, he had chosen to fight to the death. This made Yang Hongwu very surprised. He had never thought that a Dao master would burn his life force and his bloodline power to deal with a sovereign realm cultivator. It should be known that he was in his peak state. However, at this point, Yang Hongwu had no other choice. It was impossible to retreat. Since his opponent had burned his life force and his bloodline power, it was either he or Yang Hongwu would die in this battle. At this point, Yang Hongwu no longer held back. His original body, which was still cultivating, also came out. When the three incarnations and his original body appeared at the same time, there was a special change in this space. A series of mysterious ripples appeared in the void. At this moment, Yang Hongwu was enlightened. The three incarnations looked at each other. After making a hand seal, they instantly merged into Yang Hongwu's original body. After the three incarnations merged into his original body, Yang Hongwu really opened his eyes. This eye was not his eyes, but his Dharma Eye of Annihilation. This was one of his biggest trump cards. As the Dharma Eye of Annihilation opened, a terrifying divine light of annihilation appeared. After the divine light of annihilation appeared, the whole world trembled. Even the world's Dharma began to vibrate. This space seemed to be about to collapse at any time. How is this possible? When the Dharma Eye of Annihilation appeared, Huang Jinyuan, who was already shocked, was terrified to the extreme. The Dharma Eye of Annihilation was as terrible as the devouring Great Way. In the endless void and the endless universe, the devouring Great Way was unfathomably powerful. Similarly, the Dharma Eye of Annihilation was also the most powerful divine sense and secret skill in the endless universe. It was the most powerful eye technique, second to none. Chapter 2188. When the world-extinguishing divine light erupted, Huang Jinyuan already felt that something was wrong. This was because he realized that his inner world had begun to tremble. This world-extinguishing divine light was truly terrifying. Not only did it cause the space he was in to tremble and collapse, but even his inner world had also begun to tremble. This was truly too terrifying, too horrifying. A cultivator's inner world was the foundation of a cultivator. If the inner world was severely damaged, it meant that the cultivator's origin would be damaged. If the damage was very serious, it could cause a devastating blow. Once his inner world collapsed, it meant that his cultivation would fall permanently, and there would be no possibility of recovery. The inner world was too important for a practitioner. Compared to comprehending great Tao, one's inner world was the foundation. Why did one comprehend great Tao? It was all for the sake of improving his inner world to a greater extent. The higher the level of the great Tao one comprehended, the more powerful and profound it was. Then, the practitioner's inner world would be more powerful and high level. The stronger the inner world, the stronger the practitioner's strength would be. Think about it. If one's inner world had developed into a powerful great universe, then one would have the power of the entire great universe. How magnificent and magnificent would such power be? It would be almost inexhaustible. Of course, having an inner world meant that a practitioner had the possibility of becoming a universe overlord after becoming a Tao Lord. The so-called universe overlord was, in fact, a practitioner whose inner world had evolved into a small universe. The difference between a universe and a world plane was huge. In a universe, there could be many plane worlds. Having a plane world did not mean that one had a universe. This was an essential difference. Of course, a plane world could evolve into a universe, but it was too difficult. Of course, at this moment, Huang Jinyuan was shocked, but he would not stop his attack because of this. His strength had been raised to the extreme, and his lifespan and bloodline had been burned to a certain limit. It could be said that at this moment, his strength was at the absolute peak. In this state, Even if he encountered a peak Tao master or a half-step great Tao master, he would still have the courage to fight. You little bastard, no matter how terrifying and powerful your talent is, no matter how many supreme great Taos you have comprehended, your cultivation is too weak. In front of absolute strength, everything is meaningless. You can't stop me. Go to hell. After saying that, Huang Jinyuan's hand glowed with an intense light. This was his most powerful attack. The terrifying energy fluctuation caused the entire space to begin to collapse. Wherever the energy passed, the power was terrifying to the extreme. It destroyed everything as if nothing could stop it. Wherever it passed, any obstacle would turn into nothingness in front of this overbearing power. Huang Jianyuan. Yang Hongwu's face was very grave. He began to destroy this space with his Dharma Eye of Destruction, which also touched Huang Jianyuan's inner world, making it unstable and difficult for him to control its power. But this guy seemed to have gone crazy. He did not care whether his inner world was damaged or destroyed. He gathered all his power and launched an attack on Yang Hongwu. This attack was the most terrifying and powerful one Yang Hongwu had encountered since he started cultivating. The threat of this attack to him was unprecedented. Originally, he thought that he could rely on the formation he had set up in addition to his common people's Great World and Great Seal to block Huang Jinyuan's attack. However, he was shaken. The power of this attack had far exceeded his expectations. His opponent had burned his lifespan and the power of his bloodline. The energy that erupted from this attack was too terrifying. Was a half-step great Tao Master at the peak of the Tao Master realm so terrifying? His most powerful trump card was so small in front of this terrible power. It seemed that there was no possibility for him to resist. Yang Hongwu was unwilling to give up. He exerted all his power. Even if there was only a slim chance of survival, he would never give up. So what if my opponent is strong? So what if I burn my life and bloodline power? I have it too. I can burn my lifespan and my bloodline power too. Thinking of this, Yang Hongwu's eyes flashed with madness. He knew that this was the time to fight, to see who was crazier. If he took a step back, he would fall into a bottomless abyss and die without a doubt. Therefore, he couldn't retreat, not even a single step. Even if he died, he couldn't retreat a single step. Yang Hongwu roared and began to burn his life and bloodline power. However, when he was burning his lifespan and bloodline power, an extremely domineering power broke through the bindings and seals in his body and appeared. This surge of power was like a torrential flood. It was not under Yang Hongwu's control and directly erupted. At this moment, Yang Hongwu felt his soul shake violently and he lost consciousness. Not far away, Lu Yu, Zheng Qiushuang, and Zi Xintong were shocked when they saw Yang Hongwu burn his life and bloodline power. They also discovered Huang Jinyuan's terrifying power at this moment. Who would have thought that a powerful cultivator like Huang Jianyuan would be so crazy when dealing with Yang Hongwu, an expert in the sovereign realm? He would burn his life force and the power of his bloodline without any regard for the consequences. This kind of situation would only occur at the most critical moment. It could be said that when there was no chance of survival, such a crazy action would be taken. In Lu Yu's view, with Huang Jinyuan's strength, if he wanted to escape, it would not be a big problem. However, at this moment, Huang Jinyuan did not have any intention of escaping. It seemed that he intended to perish together with Yang Hongwu. Did Huang Jinyuan and Yang Hongwu have such a deep hatred? Why was he so crazy and desperate? She did not understand. However, at this moment, even if she wanted to join in, it was already too late. The three of them were too weak to resist Huang Jinyuan's crazy attack. Even if the three of them joined in, they would only be courting death. In contrast to Lu Yu, Zi Xintong and Zheng Qiushuang were filled with despair when they felt the vast and powerful energy. In the face of such a powerful force, the two women could not shake it even if they used all their strength. What did this mean? It meant that Yang Hongwu was doomed. Although Yang Hongwu's talent was amazing, his cultivation was only at the sovereign realm. He was too weak, too weak. However, at this moment, Yang Hongwu's aura suddenly changed. It was as if he had changed into another person. He stood there like an invincible expert, as if he would not be harmed even if the entire universe was destroyed. Chapter 2189. Is he still Yang Hongwu? Zi Xintong was stunned when she witnessed this scene. This person's imposing aura had changed greatly, and so had his strength. He wasn't on the same level as Yang Hongwu at all. It was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. It was truly like the difference between the heavens and the earth. If it was said that Yang Hongwu's strength wasn't bad and was like a small river in the past, then this person was like an unfathomable ocean that was extremely vast and surging with waves. It was utterly impossible to see the end of it. She was utterly unable to imagine that this was a person's body. It was Yang Hongwu. He's Yang Hongwu, yet he's also not Yang Hongwu. At this moment, Lu Yu's emotions were extremely complicated. If she wasn't wrong, then this was Yang Hongwu's past life. He was a true, peerless expert, and even her master, Furukura Daizuan, might not be able to surpass him in strength. This allowed Lu Yu to recall why her master wasn't worried about Yang Hongwu at all. Even if he'd been targeted by exalted Dao Defiance, her master hadn't said anything, and he'd merely asked her to bring a clone with him. After that clone noticed that Yang Hongwu had been cursed by the Pathbreaker curse, the clone merely made a slight expression and wasn't anxious at all. It turned out that he was aware that Yang Hongwu's origins weren't simple. However, if Yang Hongwu's past life had awakened at this moment, then would Yang Hongwu still be Yang Hongwu after he defeated Huang Jinyuan? Lu Yu wasn't confident in that at all. She didn't know, but she was very clearly aware that the possibility of Yang Hongwu obtaining dominance was extremely small. Yang Hongwu's past life was too formidable, and his memory was too enormous. If Yang Hongwu's current memories were compared to his past life, then they were simply like a speck of dust that couldn't be compared at all. How could a mere speck of dust dominate a universe? Thus, at that moment, Lu Yu felt extremely gloomy and unnatural. He should be Yang Hongwu's previous incarnation. Previous life? Was he so powerful in his previous life? Zheng Qiushuang recalled that along the way, Yang Hongwu was very afraid of the power of his previous life. He was not willing to use it at all. Thinking about it, he was really afraid of his previous life. Perhaps Yang Hongwu also knew how terrifying and powerful his previous life was. Once the power of his previous life was awakened, it meant that the memories and consciousness of his previous life would also be awakened. In that case, he might disappear and become a memory. He didn't want to lose himself. He didn't want to become someone else. Even if this person was his previous life, he didn't want to. But this time, the enemy they encountered was too powerful. Even he couldn't resist. In order to protect them, Yang Hongwu completely awakened his memory and awakened the power of his previous life to deal with this powerful and terrifying enemy in front of them. Zheng Qiushuang was very heartbroken. She couldn't do anything at all now. She blamed herself and hated herself for being so weak. Why couldn't she help Yang Hongwu at all? Not only that, she had also become a burden to Yang Hongwu. If Yang Hongwu didn't need to protect them, Yang Hongwu definitely had the ability to escape from here. Zheng Qiushuang understood this very well. Yang Hongwu's comprehension of the Tao of space had reached an incredible level. In addition, Yang Hongwu had a powerful spatial treasure. With this supreme treasure, Yang Hongwu could easily break through space and escape from here. However, in order to protect them, Yang Hongwu had to stay and awaken the power of his previous life. At the same time, Huang Jinyuan, who saw Yang Hongwu's huge change, was extremely shocked and bitter at the same time. He knew that he had no chance at all. His opponent's strength was too powerful. It was so powerful that he couldn't imagine it at all. This might not be his own strength. This was a supreme power, the reincarnation of a universe overlord. This power was the power of his previous life. He was a universe overlord. How powerful was a universe overlord? A true universe overlord, even if it was just a thought, was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Yang Hongwu, who was in front of him, had such a terrifying aura. He was a true universe overlord. However, this universe overlord hadn't really recovered or awakened. His strength was probably less than 1,000th or even 1/10,000th of his peak strength. But for Huang Jinyuan, even 1/10,000th of his strength was far from what he could withstand. It was too powerful and too terrifying. This time, he knew that he was doomed. There was no doubt about it. As for begging for mercy, it was almost impossible. He knew very well that even if he begged for mercy, his opponent wouldn't let him go. If he surrendered and became his slave, it would be equivalent to losing his freedom and completely losing himself. Moreover, it was impossible. He would definitely die. As the young master of the ancient spirit Tao sect, how could he betray the ancient spirit Tao sect and the ancient golden tree? For any disciple of a powerful sect, if he became the young master or the heir of the sect, or even one of the heirs of the sect, as long as he obtained the identity of an heir, he had to be bound to the sect. He couldn't betray the sect. Once he betrayed the sect, he would suffer a terrible backlash and die without a doubt. Of course, this was unless his strength had surpassed that of a great Tao Knight and reached the level of a half-step universe overlord. Only when his cultivation reached such a level and his strength was strong enough to ignore the restrictions of the ancient spirit Tao sect could he break free from the shackles of the sect. However, it was too difficult to reach such a level. For countless years, only 2 people in the entire ancient spirit Tao sect had reached such a level. One was the ancestor of the ancient spirit Tao sect, the ancient golden tree. He was the founder of the ancient spirit Tao sect. The other was an extremely special being. He was a cultivator of the time, Great Tao. It was said that he had broken the shackles of time and cut off his own past and future. He was already infinitely close to becoming a universe overlord. With his powerful time great path, he could even contend with a true universe overlord. Even a powerful universe overlord would not be able to kill him. In fact, a real universe overlord would have broken the shackles of time after possessing a powerful universe in his body. However, this didn't mean that he could travel between the past and the future. However, in the long river of time and space, their past and future bodies were very special existences. Once they were threatened, when they were weak, the power of their future bodies would be transmitted to protect their past bodies. Chapter 2190. Although he had a trump card, it was meaningless here. He knew that the old ancestor of the ancient spirit Tao sect, the golden ancient tree, would not cross the boundary to save him. This meant that he would definitely die. Since he knew that he was going to die, he would not let the aboriginal in front of him have it so easy. Even if he was going to die, he would tear off a layer of his skin. Thinking of this, Huang Jinyuan continued to burn his lifespan and the power of his bloodline. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan's power began to rise again after he continued to burn his lifespan and life force. His aura had reached its limit. At the cost of his life, he had broken through the shackles of the Tao Master Realm and entered the great Tao Master Realm. At this moment, the inner world in his body was almost completely drained. His power had truly reached the peak. He was ready to continue to improve and burn his 2 most precious treasures, which were also the things that Yang Hongwu coveted. One of them was his supreme creation true treasure with the space attribute. The other was the sapling of the golden ancient tree. These 2 items were absolutely precious. Even terrifying great beings at the level of Great Tao Knight would fight for them. Even universe overlords would care a little about these 2 items. For universe overlords, these 2 treasures might not be of great use, but they could still be of some help to them and allow them to comprehend some things. Therefore, Huang Jinyuan was going to burn these 2 things together and self-destruct. He would never leave them to Yang Hongwu and this damned aboriginal in front of him. At this moment, Yang Hongwu moved. Yang Hongwu, who was in the middle of the storm, waved his hand, and a terrifying cauldron formed in the void. This cauldron was very similar to Yang Hongwu's devouring oven, but it was greatly different. The power of this cauldron was much stronger than the previous one. It could be said that this cauldron was the evolved version of Yang Hongwu's devouring oven. Compared to the previous one, the difference was like heaven and earth. The violent energy surrounding him was instantly swallowed into the cauldron, and even the power of law in the surroundings was swallowed up. Even the energy in the void could not escape from this terrifying cauldron. It was as if the entire universe was about to be swallowed by this terrifying oven. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan could not control himself. Even though he had reached the level of a great Tao master, he still felt this tremendous and terrifying pressure. He truly realized how weak he was. He was like a grain of sand that could not resist at all. Even if he burned everything he had, this was still the case. He was desperate. Self-detonation. He could only choose to self-detonate. He hoped that his self-detonation would be able to cause some damage to this terrifying guy in front of him. However, when he was about to self-detonate, he was horrified to find that he could not control his body at all. This space was completely sealed, and he was completely imprisoned. He could not control his body, and even his consciousness had been imprisoned. What kind of terrifying power was this? He could even imprison his own soul and consciousness. A universe overlord? This was definitely something only a universe overlord could do. What kind of sin had he committed this time? Why was he so unlucky to have met this guy? At this moment, this was the only thought in Huang Jinyuan's mind. It was too late to regret, but it was meaningless. He could not even close his eyes. He could not even self-detonate. He could not even control his consciousness. Gradually, he felt that his power was dissipating, and so was his consciousness. He knew that this time, he was really going to die. He was going to die here in such a sullen manner, in a place that no one knew about. However, it could be said that it was his honor to die in the hands of a universe overlord. After all, not everyone was qualified to die in the hands of a universe overlord. It should be noted that great beings who had reached the level of a universe overlord would not casually attack, let alone attack a cultivator below the level of a great Tao master. For them, if they attacked a cultivator at the level of a Tao master, they would be bullying the weak. However, he was able to receive such an honor. It could be said that his life was not in vain, right? Thinking of this, Huang Jinyuan revealed a smile. He was completely relaxed, and even his soul was released. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan really made a breakthrough. He directly broke through the original shackles. He no longer relied on burning his lifespan and bloodline to break through to the level of a great Tao master. Instead, his soul realm was directly promoted to the level of a great Tao master. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan was enlightened. However, he knew that it was too late. He was going to die. However, he did not regret it now. What was the harm in dying? Moreover, before he died, he really made a breakthrough to the level of a great Tao master. It should be noted that in the entire endless void, there were very few people who could comprehend the level of a great Tao master. A true great Tao master was strong enough to establish a sect. Now, he could die without regrets. When Yang Hongwu's oven erupted with a powerful force, it directly swallowed Huang Jinyuan into the oven. The space attribute True Treasure also turned into a complete space Great Tao. This space Great Tao directly entered Yang Hongwu's sea of consciousness and integrated with the incomplete space Great Tao. At this moment, the space Great Tao in Yang Hongwu's body was completely completed. As for the cursed shackle in his sea of consciousness, it was not broken. In the next moment, the sapling of the ancient golden tree was integrated into the common people's great world. The ancient golden tree was divided into two parts. One part was integrated into the body of the ancient longevity tree, Nini, and the other part was integrated into the divine tree of creation. At this moment, Nini received a huge upgrade. The divine tree of creation also received a shocking growth. The roots of the divine tree of creation had already pierced deep into the void. It absorbed the creation chi in the endless void at an even faster speed. In this way, Yang Hongwu's common people's great world received a shocking upgrade. Moreover, it was constantly devouring the power in the void, constantly strengthening the common people's great world. It had already become a self-growing great world. It was already showing signs of evolving into a small world. Once it evolved into 3,000 small worlds, it could begin to evolve into a universe. Chapter 2191. Huang Jinyuan had been completely killed, and Yang Hongwu was no longer a threat. However, he did not stop. He was still madly devouring the power around him, extracting a vast amount of power from the endless void and pouring it into Yang Hongwu's common people's great world. At this moment, the practitioners in common people's great world could feel the surging spiritual qi. Their strength was increasing madly, and there were almost no bottlenecks. They were all wild with joy, but there were also many rational practitioners who felt fear. The great change in the world might not be a good thing for them. Of course, Yang Hongwu did not know all of this. His consciousness was still in a deep sleep. At this moment, the one who controlled Yang Hongwu's body was his previous life, an unrivaled master, an overlord of the universe. Yang Hongwu. Lu Yu looked at the powerful person in front of him and said, although he was Yang Hongwu's body, his consciousness might not be Yang Hongwu's. If it was really Yang Hongwu's consciousness, Lu Yu would be very happy. However, if it was not Yang Hongwu's consciousness, Lu Yu would treat him as an enemy. He would kill him and let Yang Hongwu return. However, Lu Yu knew that the possibility of this happening was very small. After all, the person in front of him was too powerful. He was not someone he could match. Even if his master, Farukura Daizuan, came, he might not be a match for him. He might not be able to kill him and let Yang Hongwu return. Moreover, Farukura Daizuan might not be willing to kill the person in front of him and let Yang Hongwu return. After all, Yang Hongwu was too weak compared to the person in front of him. At Farukura Daizuan's level, the things he wanted had already surpassed ordinary practitioners. He wanted to improve his universe. If there was one more overlord in his universe, the improvement of the entire universe would be huge. In that case, he would not have so much pressure. After all, in the face of the covetous eyes of all the powerful universes and universe overlords, he was not strong enough alone. Of course, Lu Yu did not know all of this. Moreover, even if Lu Yu wanted to, he might not be able to summon Farukura Daizuan. At this moment, Farukura Daizuan could not be in two places at the same time. If he could, Farukura Daizuan would really come to meet this universe overlord. Yes, but also no. He looked at Lu Yu and said, I am Yang Hongwu's previous life. However, you don't have to worry. He is still him, and I am still the past. Upon hearing this, Lu Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Since such a great being had said so, he would not go back on his words. To them, there was no need to lie at all. I just left a part of my power. At the critical moment, I can let him grow. When he becomes a great Tao Knight, that will be the time when I disappear completely. Speaking of this, he felt a little emotional. However, this was his destiny. This was his final destination. Moreover, he was not dead. He had lived on in another way. After all, Yang Hongwu was him, and he was Yang Hongwu. This could not be changed. They were the same person and the same soul. There was no difference. What is your cultivation level? Zi Xintong asked. I used to be a pinnacle universe overlord. He said, a pinnacle universe overlord? Zi Xintong was shocked. Although she didn't know what a universe overlord was, she was sure of one thing, and that was that the overlord's power must be terrifying. Yet, such a powerful being had fallen. How terrifying was his enemy? Then, how terrifying was he? If so, how powerful would Yang Hongwu's enemy be in the future? It was unimaginable. With their current power, if they wanted to deal with an enemy at that level, they were really too weak. They needed enough time to improve their power. A universe overlord is a realm above a great Tao Knight. At this time, Lu Yu explained, I don't care who you are. I just want my husband, Yang Hongwu, to come back. You are not him. Zheng Qiushuang's idea was different. It was very simple. She stared at this Yang Hongwu in front of her and said, the person she wanted to see was not this Yang Hongwu in front of her, but the person in her heart, her husband. Don't worry, he is fine. His soul is too weak. At this time, it is stabilizing and improving. He will wake up soon. You are his previous life, and you are so powerful. How could you die? Zi Xintong looked at him and said, Who is your enemy? If they come for us, how can we deal with them? That's right. Our power is not even comparable to your current power. If we meet your enemy, won't we have no way to fight back or even escape? At this time, Liu also spoke up. She had also realized this point. Yang Hongwu's previous life was so terrifying and powerful. How could his enemy be weak? If his enemy was not strong, he would not have died. When one reached the level of a universe overlord, they were immortal. Even if their universe was destroyed, they could still survive. As long as there was a speck of dust in his universe, he would not die. He could be reborn again. It was just that he had used up too much of his power. It was too difficult to recover. When it came to true universe overlords, they could not be killed. They could only be sealed. Of course, unless the enemy was a great being with special means. This kind of great being, this kind of special life form, was known as the universe hunter or universe destroyer. They had special means to destroy the universe and kill universe overlords. However, this kind of life form was too rare. It was because of this secret technique and this special feature that all the universe overlords were afraid of them. Almost all the universe overlords would join forces to deal with them. Therefore, these races had no way to survive. In fact, Yang Hongwu's previous life was very helpless. This was because his power back then could almost dominate all the universes. When he was at the pinnacle of the universe overlords, his power had reached a terrifying level. No universe overlord could compete with him. However, after all, he was only one person. He could not resist the joint attack of all the universe overlords. In fact, he was the most mysterious kind of person in the endless void. He was a universe devourer. He could devour all the universes to improve himself. This was not as simple as devouring the Great Path. It was much more terrifying than devouring the Great Path. When he was at his peak, he could easily devour a universe. It only took him a few hours to do so. This showed how terrifying and powerful he was back then. Chapter 2192. My enemies are indeed very powerful. There's no doubt about that. But now, it's not something you need to worry about. It's still too far away. Besides, they can't enter this part of the universe, so you don't have to worry at all. He continued, They're too powerful, and they're very wary of me. If you expose yourselves, it's hard to say whether you'll live or die. Of course, they're not as terrifying or powerful as you think. Even universe overlords have weaknesses. They're not invincible. If we really encounter them, what should we do? Lu Yu asked. Everyone had weaknesses. As long as one was a human, or even any creature, even if it was a universe, they would have weaknesses. Even a great universe would have its own weaknesses. It was impossible to be invincible. However, if the difference in cultivation level was too great, it would be too difficult to find the other party's weakness. Even if they found the other party's weakness, how could they deal with a universe overlord? Only a universe overlord could truly deal with a universe overlord. In the eyes of a universe overlord, all other creatures were like ants that could be annihilated with a snap of their fingers. This was why this Yang Hongwu in front of them was able to kill a great Down Knight so easily, even though he only had a part of his power from his previous life and hadn't reached his peak. He might not even have 1/10,000th of the power he had at his peak. His opponent didn't even have the power to resist. How big was the gap between them? This was why Lu Yu was so worried. After all, he had used his power just now. His aura would definitely leak out. His enemies, those powerful universe overlords, would definitely be able to sense his existence. If they came chasing after them, would they be able to deal with him? Yang Hongwu's previous life saw through their thoughts. He said, You don't have to worry about my aura leaking out. I've already sealed the space here. My aura won't leak out for the time being. It'll take at least a few hundred years for them to sense my aura. In the next few hundred years, I think he'll be able to reach a level where he can contend with them. If they can't do it in a few hundred years, then they'll die. a few hundred years to reach a level where he can contend with them? Upon hearing this, the three women were stunned. What kind of joke was this? What level and realm was he at? He was at the level of the legendary overlords of the universe. How powerful were his enemies? It was too difficult for Yang Hongwu to reach such a level and realm in just a few hundred years. No matter how powerful and amazing his talent was, it would be difficult for him to reach that level in such a short period of time, unless he accepted the power from his previous life. Do you mean that he accepts your power? Lu Yu asked. No, I only left a portion of my power behind. It can only be used to protect him at a critical moment. Furthermore, he is still unable to refine this bit of power of mine. Furthermore, if he relies on refining my power to increase his cultivation, it will not be of any help to him in the future. He can only rely on himself for this. It's too difficult. It's impossible to do it in such a short period of time. Don't you have any other way to help him improve his cultivation? Lu Yu looked at him and said, after all, this was too difficult for anyone. Even if a peerless almighty lost his cultivation, it would be impossible for him to cultivate back so quickly. Even if he had enough resources, it was impossible. Unless he had the power from his previous life and accepted his original power, he could do it. However, Yang Hongwu was different. His current physical body couldn't bear such a terrifying and powerful power. If his physical body wasn't strong enough, he couldn't do it at all. For any cultivator, the physical body was the foundation. If the physical body wasn't strong enough, then no matter how much power he had, he wouldn't be able to bear it. Therefore, the most important thing for Yang Hongwu now was how to improve the strength of his physical body. If his physical body was strong enough, then it would be able to withstand enough power. In this way, he would be able to improve his strength to a very powerful level in a short period of time. Although Yang Hongwu was able to fight against Dao lords and even Dao masters in the sovereign realm, this was already his limit. If he faced a great Dao master, even if he had enough power, he wouldn't be able to withstand the power released. No matter how terrifying and powerful his devouring furnace was, it couldn't withstand such a powerful impact. Once a certain limit was exceeded, his physical body would collapse and his inner world would be completely destroyed. His physical body is too weak. Yang Hongwu's previous incarnation said, for example, if I hadn't used my power to protect my physical body, it would have collapsed. My power is sealed in his body. If it wasn't sealed, the consequences would be unimaginable. A person's true strength doesn't depend on how much power he has, but on how to strengthen his physical body and soul. The physical body is the most fundamental existence. Only when the physical body is strong enough can his soul become stronger. A strong physical body can accommodate a strong soul and strong power. Then how can we make his physical body stronger? Lu Yu looked at him and said. Lu Yu knew very well that since he had said so, there must be a way. After all, he and Yang Hongwu were one, and Yang Hongwu was also him. The martial technique he cultivates in is an evolution of my martial technique. However, it has already changed from the martial technique I originally cultivated in. Yang Hongwu's previous incarnation paused and said, then, is this a change for the better or the worse? Zheng Qiushuang hurriedly asked, there won't be any problems, right? For Zheng Qiushuang, Yang Hongwu's safety was the most important thing. As for the problem of cultivation, although she was also concerned, it wasn't that important. As long as Yang Hongwu was safe and sound, it was enough. I don't know about this. I have never seen anyone practice this path, but one thing is true. For any practitioner, the most suitable one is the best. Although he is my reincarnation, it may not be suitable for him to practice my cultivation technique and follow my old path. His physique in this life was no longer the physique of a universe devourer, but he had the ability of a universe devourer. In fact, this was the most terrifying thing. He had no way to completely understand his physical body in this life. It could be seen that this physique was very special. Chapter 2193. Only by walking his own path can he truly achieve Tao. Only then can he surpass me and face his enemies. After Yang Hongwu finished talking about his past life, he fell into a deep sleep. At this time, Yang Hongwu's body fell down. Lu Yu and the other two quickly supported him. They knew that at this time, Yang Hongwu's consciousness from his previous life had fallen into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, it would be time for Yang Hongwu to face a strong enemy again. However, the three women were relieved after Yang Hongwu's consciousness fell into a deep sleep. After all, this was not the Yang Hongwu they wanted. After a while, Yang Hongwu woke up. Looking at the three women's worried eyes, Yang Hongwu took a deep breath. He was worried that he was hallucinating. He's awake. It's good that you're awake. The three women were very happy after seeing Yang Hongwu wake up. I'm not dead. Yang Hongwu was very surprised after he sensed his body's condition. His body seemed to be fine. Not only that, his strength had increased a lot. This surprised Yang Hongwu. What happened? Don't you have any memory at all? Zi Xintong looked at Yang Hongwu and asked, Who saved us? Yang Hongwu looked at the three women and asked. He was very confused. He was able to save him from that state. Furthermore, he was able to easily defeat Huang Jinyuan, seize his supreme treasure, fuse it into his body, and transform him. If that was the case, then this person's strength was extremely formidable. Could it be that Lu Yu's master had made a move? Yang Hongwu guessed and waited for the three women's answer. It's you. Lu Yu paused and said, To be precise, it's your past life. Past life? Yang Hongwu's face changed slightly when he heard this. He knew that his strength in his past life was very strong, but he did not expect it to be to this extent. That's right, it's your previous life. However, you don't have to worry. At this moment, Lu Yu said, You said in your previous life that he would not possess your physical body. You would still be you. His power is only for you to protect yourself. When you are strong enough, he will give up on himself and merge with you. You will then be the dominant one. However, we don't have much time. What do you mean you don't have much time? You have to raise your cultivation to a sufficiently powerful level within a few hundred years. You have to at least reach the Tao Master Realm. Otherwise, I'm afraid we won't be able to survive. Zi Xintong explained. Is this world going to change? Yang Hongwu asked again. The enemies of your previous life were too powerful. If we weren't strong enough, we would have died. There was no other way. Lu Yu said, Is it very powerful? Yang Hongwu smiled bitterly. It was very difficult to raise his cultivation to the Tao Master Realm within a few hundred years. One must know that it was very difficult to raise his cultivation. How could it be so easy? It's not very powerful. It's extremely powerful. It's so powerful that you can't imagine it. It's an existence that surpasses the great Tao Masters and is at the level of a universe overlord. Moreover, there is more than one enemy. In your previous life, you were a universe overlord, a very powerful one. This shows how terrifying your enemy was. You must know that even he has fallen. Lu Yu said, Your strength in your previous life is the strongest I've ever seen. It's even much stronger than my teacher. I like to add that this is not his peak state. Zi Xintong chimed in. Upon hearing this, Yang Hongwu's face turned bitter. He did not expect his enemy to be so much stronger than he had imagined. Originally, he thought that Zi Tian was his destined enemy and was very powerful. But now it seemed that Zi Tian's strength was far from that. Zi Tian was not even worthy of carrying his shoes for his real enemy. In fact, Zi Tian was far from being as simple as Yang Hongwu had imagined. However, Yang Hongwu did not know all of this. Zi Tian did not know. Zi Xintong, Lu Yu, and the others did not know. The two of them were destined to be enemies. They were destined to be enemies. All of this was predestined. In fact, even Yang Hongwu in his previous life did not know. Sigh, it seems that I was too naive. However, I will work hard. I will protect you and not let any harm come to you unless I die. At this moment, Yang Hongwu's tone was very firm. It's good that you know. Zi Xintong was very happy at this moment. After all, Yang Hongwu's words included her. This blockhead was finally enlightened. However, It won't be easy for you to improve your cultivation. Lu Yu said, your previous life told us to tell you that the most important thing for you now is to improve your physical body. Make your body strong enough. Otherwise, you won't be able to withstand that powerful force. Physical body? My physical body is too weak. Upon hearing this, Yang Hongwu was a little dumbfounded. His physical body should be invincible under the same realm, right? In fact, even Tao Lord experts couldn't compare to him in terms of physical body. Yet this guy actually said that his physical body was too weak and not strong enough. This left Yang Hongwu speechless and in disbelief. According to what he said, what kind of level did his physical body have to reach to be qualified? That's right. Your physical body is too weak. Lu Yu nodded and said, I'm not very clear about this point. However, what you said in your previous life should be true. My master also said that his physical body was not strong enough. If his physical body was strong enough when his cultivation was low, he wouldn't be stuck at that realm now. This shows how strong the physical body is to them. I guess that to become a universe overlord, one must have a strong physical body. If the physical body is not strong enough, it will be a huge problem to become a great Tao Lord. I now feel that it's very difficult for me to improve my strength. I'm afraid that it's because my physical body is not strong enough. However, I feel that my physical body has been improved to the extreme. It's too difficult to improve it again. Yang Hongwu smiled bitterly. In fact, he had already felt the bottleneck of his physical body. This time, although his physical body had improved a little, there was still a huge bottleneck. It was too difficult to break through it. He didn't know how to do it at all. No matter what, you have to break the limit of your physical body. I know a place that is very helpful for the cultivation of the physical body. It's very dangerous. Even a Tao master might die if he enters it. Speaking of this, Lu Yu's face was quite solemn. She had been to that place before. Now that she thought of it, she still felt a little scared. Chapter 2194. Where is it? Yang Hongwu asked. The life and death spring, where one can live or die with a single thought. The supreme life and death energy can temper one's physical body. Lu Yu said, life and death spring? Zi Xintong's expression changed. She had heard of the life and death spring before. It was a unique space, not in the divine domain. It was a special space in the legends. There was only one life and death spring in that huge space, and there were no other living creatures. It could be seen how tyrannical the life and death spring was. In that space, there was no room for any other living beings. No expert would be so tyrannical to occupy a space alone, but this spring was so tyrannical. Therefore, the life and death spring was really terrifying. It is said that the life and death spring is located outside the all-heaven divine domain, in a special space in the endless void. That space is not fixed, but it surrounds the all-heaven divine domain. It is not easy to find this space. Moreover, the life and death spring is said to be able to absorb the power of life and death. Those who come into contact with the life and death spring will either become stronger or die without a doubt. However, those who become stronger are few and far between, almost none. Zi Xintong pondered for a moment and said, I accidentally saw this in an ancient book. I don't know if it's true or not. It's true. Ordinary people can't enter the life and death spring, and those who enter are too few to come out. When I entered and came out, it was because of my master's help. If it wasn't for my master, I wouldn't have been able to enter. Even if I entered, I would have died. Therefore, I don't recommend you to enter the life and death spring to temper your physical body. Lu Yu looked at Yang Hongwu and said. Zheng Qiushuang quickly said, if that's the case, then we shouldn't go. It's too dangerous. No, I'll try. Yang Hongwu shook his head. He knew that he would definitely not die. At the very least, the life and death spring would not be able to do anything to him. If what he had said about his previous life was true, then everything would not be too big of a problem. Even if he encountered a life and death crisis, he would just have to use the life-saving opportunity left behind by his previous life. using this opportunity in exchange for a chance to go one step further and reach a higher level. Yang Hongwu was very willing to do so. Moreover, even though Yang Hongwu had encountered many dangers, he knew very well that he wouldn't die. Because of this, he hadn't truly comprehended life and death. He hadn't truly comprehended the power of life and death. He hadn't grasped the true meaning of life and death. Therefore, this was an extremely good opportunity. The spring of life and death. He wanted to see if the so-called spring of life and death was really that terrifying. Of course, what he wanted even more was that if he could refine the life and death spring, his strength would definitely take a qualitative leap. Now, even though his strength had increased by quite a bit compared to his previous life, Yang Hongwu knew that this was still due to his previous life and his strength. He was still too weak. That strength didn't belong to him. Yang Hongwu was very concerned about this point. Husband. Hearing Yang Hongwu's words, Zheng Qiushuang was very worried. She looked at Yang Hongwu anxiously. In her heart, Yang Hongwu's safety was always the first. She didn't want to see Yang Hongwu take risks. She would rather die than see Yang Hongwu get hurt. At this moment, Zheng Qiushuang had such a heart. She was such a woman, a truly pure woman. Very pure and simple. Yang Hongwu looked at Zheng Qiushuang. He knew that she was worried about him. He also knew how important he was in Zheng Qiushuang's heart. How could he have such a woman? What did he do? Shuanger, it's okay. I'm not in danger. Moreover, for our future, I have to go. As a man, I have an unshirkable responsibility. I can't put you in danger. I can't risk our future. I'm too weak now. I'm too weak to be a man. I'm too weak to even protect you. Yang Hongwu looked at the three women and said, when he faced Huang Jinyuan in his peak state, he had never felt so helpless. Although Huang Jinyuan had burned everything, including his life, Huang Jinyuan had burned his soul and erupted with a terrifying power. It made Yang Hongwu feel despair. Yang Hongwu even knew that even if he burned his blood, life, and soul, he wouldn't be as powerful. Therefore, he needed to improve his cultivation and strength so that he would have enough power to deal with his enemies. However, the time given to him was too short. It wasn't enough for him to slowly improve his strength and cultivation. He needed time too much, but the enemy wouldn't give him this time. Therefore, he could only strive to shorten the time. Are you sure? Li was also moved. This man hadn't changed after all. He was still so responsible as a man, even if he had to pay with his life. This was the person she had been waiting for so long. He was the person in her heart. If it wasn't for this, she would have given up and forgotten about that relationship long ago. At this moment, she really understood how deep her feelings were in her heart. She loved Yang Hongwu so much. Moreover, she loved him thoroughly. She could see that every woman around Yang Hongwu was like this. Although her mood was very complicated, she also knew that she couldn't leave Yang Hongwu. If Yang Hongwu really died, then she knew that she absolutely didn't have the courage to continue living alone. She couldn't do it. If they were to die, they had to die together. Yes. Yang Hongwu nodded. No matter what, I have to go. This is what I should do. Since you've already made up your mind, I know that we can't change it. However, you have to remember one thing. You must not die. If you die, you should know what the consequences will be. They won't live alone, and so will I. At this moment, Zi Xintong looked at Yang Hongwu and said in a very serious tone, I will. I won't let that day come. Yang Hongwu nodded. At this moment, he had completely accepted Zi Xintong and her feelings. Husband, I won't stop you. However, if you die, I won't live alone. Zheng Qiushuang said, Don't worry. I won't die for you. Yang Hongwu's lips curled into a smile as he said, You should know that I never do things that I'm not confident in. This time is no different. I believe that I won't die, and it's impossible for me to die. When I return, my strength will rise to another level, and I will be able to protect you. Chapter 2195. How can I enter the life and death spring? Yang Hongwu asked. This was the key point. If he couldn't even enter the life and death spring, then everything would be meaningless. Therefore, he had to be able to enter the life and death spring first. The life and death spring is erratic. It's in the void of the all heavens divine domain. It's very difficult to enter the life and death spring, but it's not impossible. My master once gave me something to locate the life and death spring. As he said that, Liu took out a piece of simple, black and white spiritual jade. The piece of simple, black and white spiritual jade was filled with the power of life and death, as well as the power of space. This powerful spatial energy, together with the overbearing life and death energy, seemed to lead to a special space. This might be the reason why this piece of spiritual jade could lead him to the life and death spring. This is the life and death jade. This jade was dug out by my master from the life and death spring. It condensed a special energy that can lock the location of the life and death spring. Previously, I relied on this piece of ancient jade and my master's power to enter the life and death spring. Liu placed the piece of life and death spiritual jade in Yang Hongwu's hand and explained, "The life and death jade really lives up to its name. What a terrifying life and death energy, so overbearing." Feeling the powerful life and death energy on the life and death jade, Yang Hongwu was shocked. Even Zheng Qiushuang and Zi Xintong, who hadn't come into contact with the life and death spiritual jade, could feel how terrifying it was. It was already so overbearing just by containing the life and death energy. If it really entered the space of the life and death spring, how terrifying would it be? This spatial energy should be the spatial energy of the life and death spring. We can use this energy and the life and death energy to lock the location of the life and death spring. Yang Hongwu said, this was because although Yang Hongwu had the power of the curse in his body that blocked the space of his sea of consciousness, forming a powerful shackle, he had the great Tao of space. Moreover, this great Tao of space was extremely powerful. It could be said that the current Yang Hongwu's strength wasn't inferior to him before his sea of consciousness was sealed. In fact, his comprehension of the great Tao of space was much more powerful than before. This was without a doubt. Therefore, Yang Hongwu could use the life and death energy and the life and death energy to lock the location of the life and death spring. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to do it. Not only that, the planar boat in Yang Hongwu's body had been completely restored. Because of the powerful spatial energy, the planar boat was at its peak state. Yang Hongwu could easily use the planar boat and his own spatial divine ability to enter the space of the life and death spring. Even with this piece of life and death spiritual jade that can lock the location of the life and death spring, it's not easy to enter the life and death spring. The space barrier of the life and death spring is very strong. Moreover, there's a strong repulsive force. It's not easy to break through the space barrier. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to do it. After a pause, Liu Yu continued, even if you can break through the space barrier, once you enter the space of the life and death spring, you'll immediately be attacked by the life and death energy of the life and death spring. If you don't have enough power to protect yourself, you'll be defeated in an instant. This isn't a problem for me. It's not difficult for me to enter the space of the life and death spring. I have the spatial divine ability and also a spatial divine treasure. Moreover, I've obtained the supreme spatial divine treasure, the golden origin, which greatly improved my great Tao of space. Therefore, it's not difficult to enter the space of the life and death spring. I'm confident. Yang Hongwu smiled and explained. What he said was the truth. He could do it. So when will you set off? Liu Yu said, before you set off, you have to be prepared to withstand the impact of the life and death energy. I suggest you familiarize yourself with the life and death energy in the life and death spiritual jade first. If you can refine a strand of the life and death energy, then it'll be much easier to enter the space of the life and death spring. At least, you won't be injured by the impact of the life and death energy, and your strength will be greatly reduced. Generally speaking, those who can enter the space of the life and death spring will be injured by the impact of the life and death energy, causing their strength to be greatly reduced. Therefore, they won't be able to continue resisting the corrosion of the life and death energy of the life and death spring, resulting in their death in the life and death spring. Refine a strand of the life and death energy. The corners of Yang Hongwu's mouth curved into a smile. If it was someone else, it would be very difficult to refine a strand of the life and death energy of the life and death spring. After all, the life and death energy of the life and death spring was equivalent to the law contained in the great Tao of life and death. It was the crystallization of the law of life and death, and was not an ordinary law. It was not the law of life and death in the life and death spring. The difference between the two was huge. If the law of life and death in the lower realms was a candle flame, then the law of life and death in the life-death spring was the dazzling light of the moon in the sky. The difference between the two was huge, and they couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. The life and death energy was the two extremes of life and death. These two forces merged together, but they didn't repel each other. How difficult would it be to refine this force? How difficult would it be to comprehend such a law? The comprehension of the life and death energy was even more difficult than comprehending the space and time energy. However, it wasn't impossible for Yang Hongwu. He had a strong comprehension ability and the devouring furnace. These were the key points. The devouring furnace had been upgraded once again. It could devour all kinds of forces, including the powerful and domineering life and death energy. It could even refine the life and death energy of the life and death spring. If it was the real life and death spring that controlled the life and death energy and the law of life and death, Yang Hongwu would never be able to refine it with the help of the devouring furnace and take it for himself. However, the life and death energy of a life and death spiritual jade was not replenished by the life and death spring. Without the life and death spring as its foundation, it was like a rootless duckweed. Without a backer, it would be much easier to refine it. Moreover, what Yang Hongwu needed to do was not to completely refine the life and death energy of the life and death spiritual jade. Although he could do that, it would take too much time. Yang Hongwu couldn't wait that long. He only needed to refine a strand of life and death energy and integrate it into his body. When he entered the life and death spring, it would be the time for him to show his true capabilities. That's right. It's best to refine a strand of life and death energy. Lu Yu said, otherwise it's too dangerous. It's not difficult. Give me some time. Protect me. Yang Hongwu closed his eyes and sat down. Chapter 2196. Yang Hongwu, who was sitting cross-legged, circulated the power in his body. He used the power of space and devouring power to extract the power from the life and death spirit jade. To Yang Hongwu's surprise, the power of life and death in the life and death spirit jade was like a huge millstone of life and death. It was extremely overbearing against any power that entered the life and death spirit jade. Even Yang Hongwu's power of space was instantly crushed into nothingness by the terrifying millstone of life and death when it entered the life and death spirit jade. Even Yang Hongwu's devouring furnace was pushed back by the overbearing millstone of life and death. At this moment, Yang Hongwu's body trembled as he suffered from the backlash of the power. He felt a sweet taste in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. The three women who were guarding Yang Hongwu were extremely worried when they saw this scene. Husband, is he all right? Zheng Qiushuang was the most worried when she saw this scene. Although Lu Yu and Zi Xintong were worried, they trusted Yang Hongwu very much. They knew that Yang Hongwu would be fine. After all, he was so confident that nothing would happen to him. This was their trust in Yang Hongwu's strength. Although Zheng Qiushuang also trusted Yang Hongwu, her worry was written all over her face. For her, she wished that she could be the one who was injured. It's all right. You have to believe in him. This is just a small injury. You should know that the life and death spirit jade is extremely overbearing. However, it's nothing compared to the life and death spring. If he can't even subdue the life and death spirit jade, how can he subdue the life and death spring? If he doesn't have the ability to resist the life and death force, then we can't allow him to enter the life and death spring. Otherwise, it's no different from sending himself to his death. Liu explained. That's right. If he can't even control the life and death spirit jade, or even refine a strand of life and death force, then we can't let Yang Hongwu enter the life and death spring. Zi Xintong nodded and said, the life and death spring was so terrifying that even Great Path Venerables would not benefit from it. They might even die in it. Therefore, without sufficient strength to resist the power of life and death, it was best not to enter the life and death spring. However, unlike the two of them, Zhang Qiushuang understood very well that since Yang Hongwu had already made a decision, no one else could change it. Unless all of them were present and everyone worked together to dissuade him, it would be impossible to change his mind. Or, if one of them encountered a huge danger, it would be impossible. In that case, Yang Hongwu would give up everything. However, under normal circumstances, it was impossible for Yang Hongwu to change his mind. Therefore, Yang Hongwu thought a lot before he did anything. He considered almost all kinds of possibilities. If he wasn't completely sure, he wouldn't take risks easily. And once he made a decision, it would be difficult to change it. However, the life and death spring was full of variables, powerful variables. This was exactly what Zhang Qiushuang was worried about. Of course, the reason why Yang Hongwu was so confident was probably because Lu Yu had entered the life and death spring before and came back safe and sound. This was probably an important reason. Yang Hongwu saw a trace of opportunity in Lu Yu. In addition, the powerful force in Yang Hongwu's body from his previous life was his most powerful backing. In fact, the three women also knew this. That was why Lu Yu brought up the life and death spring. After Yang Hongwu agreed, Zi Xintong and Zhang Qiushuang did not continue to stop him, although they opposed it. However, if he lost the powerful life-saving trump card of his previous life and did not obtain any benefits, his physical body would not be tempered and his strength would not be improved, then the loss would really outweigh the gain. Of course, this was a possibility, but it was not impossible. After all, the life and death spring was too mysterious, too strange, and too powerful. Everything in the life and death spring was unknown. Who knew if there was a terrifying expert in the space of the life and death spring? Could it be that this expert tricked others into the life and death spring in order to increase his own strength or to recover himself? If that was the case, then it would be dangerous. Of course, this possibility was not very big. If that was the case, Farouk Radaizuan would not leave it alone. After all, this universe could be said to be his foundation. Once he lost this universe, then Farouk Radaizuan would be like a rootless duckweed. His strength would disappear along with the power of this universe and become weak, without the possibility of continuing to improve. In fact, Zi Xintong even suspected that this space of the life and death spring was deliberately opened up by Farouk Radaizuan. The purpose was to attract some reincarnated experts of the overlords of the ancient universe into the life and death spring, then to seize their strength, plunder their resources, kill them, and take away their everything. However, thinking of this, Zi Xintong stopped. If that was the case, with the strength of Farouk Radaizuan, who was also Lu Yu's master, there was no need for him to spend so much effort, right? If he really wanted to make a move on Yang Hongwu, there was no need for him to wait until now. Even so, Zi Xintong was still a little worried. However, for the sake of Lu Yu's face, Zi Xintong did not say it in front of Yang Hongwu. Moreover, Zi Xintong believed that with what she could think of, how could Yang Hongwu not think of it? On the other hand, the three women outside were very worried, but at this time, Yang Hongwu's mouth curved into a smile. Although the power of the life and death spiritual jade was so domineering that it even exceeded his expectations, he had found a way. This life and death spiritual jade was indeed very powerful, but in fact, this piece of life and death spiritual jade was the key to the life and death spring. This piece of life and death spiritual jade was actually the origin core of the space of the life and death spring. Although this was only a small piece of the core of the space of the life and death spring, if he could gain the recognition of this piece of life and death spiritual jade and refine it, then the space of the life and death spring would be refined by him, and it would help him to truly comprehend the great way of life and death. The power to control life and death was one of the most terrifying powers in the Great Thousand Universe, and it was definitely not inferior to his devouring Tao. Moreover, the reason why Yang Hongwu was so confident was because the power of life and death in the life and death spring was very similar to the yin-yang millstone in his Nine Heavens divine dragon technique. Yin and yang, from another perspective, were also life and death. The power of yang symbolized the power of life, and the power of yin was equivalent to the power of death. Wasn't the yin-yang millstone also another kind of life and death millstone? However, this life and death millstone had not really matured yet. Chapter 2197. Revered Pupil of Life and Death, page 1/1. Yin-yang millstone go. Yang Hongwu used a mystic technique that he had not used for a long time. It was the great millstone of yin-yang. An ancient and majestic millstone appeared in the void. This millstone was the great millstone of yin-yang. Although the appearance of the great millstone of yin-yang was quite different from the great millstone of life and death, they seemed to have originated from the same source. This gave Yang Hongwu enough confidence. However, Yang Hongwu couldn't use the yin-yang millstone to clash head-on with the life and death millstone. That wouldn't be a good thing. Clashing head-on with the life and death millstone was equivalent to courting death. After all, the yin-yang millstone was of a lower level and was much weaker. Once it clashed with the life and death millstone, it would probably be devoured directly. Therefore, Yang Hongwu wasn't that stupid. When the power of the life and death millstone was triggered, Yang Hongwu activated the devouring furnace again. This time, Yang Hongwu was much more careful than before. Furthermore, Yang Hongwu already had sufficient experience in resisting the power of the millstone of life and death. Using the devouring furnace as the main force and drawing support from the power of the great millstone of life and death, a wisp of life and death power was extracted. After this wisp of life and death power was extracted, Yang Hongwu did not directly use the devouring furnace to devour it. Devouring it would not bring him any great benefits, and refining it would not be that easy. Therefore, Yang Hongwu directly integrated this wisp of life and death force into his yin-yang millstone. The supreme art immediately evolved after devouring the wisp of force of life and death. Rays of godly light appeared in the sky. Bell and drum sounds rang out, the sound of the great Tao, the sound of celebration. This was a supreme divine ability of the creation realm, and it was mastered by Yang Hongwu. This was a divine ability of the creation realm. How strong and how domineering it was. Even though it had yet to take shape, it was already terrifying to the extreme. Once it was truly mastered, this ability would not be inferior to the devouring furnace. Yang Hongwu had already sensed this when he had fused that wisp of life and death force into the yin-yang millstone, causing it to transform. He had actually used the millstone of life and death to raise his yin-yang millstone to the level of the millstone of life and death. If his strength was raised to a certain level, his yin-yang great millstone might even have a chance to replace the true great millstone of life and death and become the true controller of life and death. He had become the master of the great path of life and death. This was the truly terrifying part. Therefore, the birth of every supreme creation-level divine ability would cause a change in the world. For any great Tao, the birth of such a divine ability was a threat to their existence. However, for universe, the birth of such a divine ability was of great benefit to the universe. Therefore, Yang Hongwu was congratulated by the universe. The three women in the outside world naturally saw this scene as well. When the sound of the great Tao rang out, flowers fell from the sky and bells and drums rang together. They saw this vision, which meant that Yang Hongwu had obtained some supreme treasure or supreme divine ability. This was the congratulations of the great Tao of the universe. This made the three women overjoyed. This was simply wonderful. This meant that Yang Hongwu had succeeded and gained great benefits. It was very likely that he had comprehended the great Tao of life and death and gained its recognition, even the recognition of the life and death spiritual jade. In this way, there would be absolutely no problem for him to enter the space of life and death spring, and there would be no danger of death. How could the three women not be happy? At this time, in the extraterritorial world, an old man opened his eyes. One of his eyes was black and the other was white. This was the terrifying eye of life and death. The eye of life and death was one of the most powerful eye techniques in the myriad realms. It was not inferior to Yang Hongwu's Dharma, Eye of Destruction. This old man was the legendary disciple of the Life and Death Great Master. His name was Life and Death Great Master. His strength was very strong. He was a peak Tao master, a half-step Great Tao master. Coupled with his Eye of Life and Death, its power was extremely terrifying. Almost no one was his opponent. What he wanted was the power of the Life and Death millstone to control life and death. He wanted to truly comprehend life and death and the great Tao of life and death to become the legendary Life and Death Great Master. This was his goal. Life and Death Great Master was incomparably powerful. However, Life and Death Great Master had fallen in an ancient and terrifying battle a long time ago. As the youngest disciple of Life and Death Great Master, Life and Death Great Master had survived because of his weak strength and excellent luck. He had not dared to show his face for many years. Now, after waiting for endless years, he finally sensed a wisp of the great Tao of life and death. The thing he had been looking for a long time had finally appeared. It was the true inheritance of his master. It might even be the reincarnation of his master, Life and Death Great Master. However, he did not want to cultivate his master's reincarnation. His purpose was to seize the inheritance of his master's reincarnation and seize his great Tao to improve himself. He wanted to replace his master and become the true Life and Death Great Master. He had built the Life and Death Gate. The Life and Death Gate was constantly growing and almost covered the entire divine realm. He was in the extraterritorial world, which was one of the safest places. Ordinary people could not find him at all. Unless one had comprehended the great Tao of space, it was absolutely impossible to find his location. Therefore, he was safe. Of course, if a universe overlord level figure really discovered his existence and wanted to harm him, he would not be able to resist at all. He knew very well how terrifying a universe overlord level figure was. He hadn't even become a great path knight yet. If he encountered a great being at the level of a great path knight, he would die, let alone a universe overlord. His teacher was also a supreme great being at the level of a universe overlord, but he still died in that terrible war. It was obvious how powerful and terrifying his teacher's enemy was. Therefore, although he had established the Life and Death Gate, he had never really appeared. No one knew the true face of the leader of the Life and Death Gate, and no one knew his location. He only appeared as a projection of his avatar. The Life and Death Gate was now a first-class existence in the myriad worlds. There were even peak Tao masters among the elders of the Life and Death Gate, who were not much weaker than him. If it were not for the fact that the elder did not have any powerful techniques or true treasures, his strength would have surpassed him. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 2198. The Great Tao of the Universe, page 1/1. Someone has comprehended the millstone of life and death. It seems that the Life and Death spring has appeared. Life and Death, Icenia Master's eyes flashed. He was determined to get the Life and Death spring. If he couldn't get it, he wouldn't be able to become the next Life and Death Great Master. For any universe overlord, their inheritance was limited, and the Great Tao they comprehended was very special. Before they died, they wouldn't allow anyone else to surpass them on the Great Tao they comprehended. Every universe overlord had comprehended a unique great Tao of the universe. Only when they died would there be someone else who comprehended their great Tao of the universe and break through to become a universe overlord. Therefore, unless it was a newly created great Tao of the universe, it was impossible to break the shackles of the previous universe overlords. If someone took this great Tao of the universe, unless you were able to kill him with your own strength, you would not be able to take another step forward and surpass him as long as he was alive. This matter was a terrifying obstacle for any genius. It could even be said to be a natural moat. For any universe overlord, there was a world of difference between the strength of the cultivators below the level of a universe overlord and that of a true universe overlord. In front of a universe overlord, those who hadn't become a universe overlord were not even worth a speck of dust, let alone ants. If a universe overlord wanted to kill a cultivator who was a half-step universe overlord, it would only take a few minutes. It would be a piece of cake for him. However, there was a limit to what a universe overlord could do to a cultivator below the level of a universe overlord. In a universe overlord's own universe, he was the master. He was the will of the universe, and no one could go against his will. Therefore, cultivators in his own universe couldn't defeat him unless there was an anomaly. Only an anomaly in a universe could break the shackles. However, it was almost impossible for an anomaly to be born in any universe. Any anomaly would be exposed under the observation of the eye of the great Tao of the universe. Such an anomaly would be targeted by the will of the entire universe. Even if the universe overlord of this universe didn't take action, it would still be difficult for the anomaly to grow. If it wasn't an anomaly, it would be even more difficult to break free from the shackles of the universe. As a disciple of a universe overlord, Life and Death Pupil Sr. was well aware of this. He had realized that his teacher, Life and Death Great Master, had fallen, so there was no longer any obstacle in his great path. As long as he had enough comprehension, enough resources, and a strong heart, he would be able to walk at the forefront of this great path. Once he broke through to the level of a half-step universe overlord, no one would be able to threaten him. However, this was not an easy task. He needed to find the inheritance left behind by his master, the Life and Death Sovereign, which was the Life and Death Spring. Death Millstone of Life and Death Millstone of Life and Death was his master life, and Death Millstone of Creation true treasure of creation. Life and Death Millstone of Life and Death had been activated, which meant that the Life and Death Spring had appeared. If he couldn't get the Life and Death Spring, he would really lose the inheritance of the great Tao of life and death. If someone else got it, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds. Once that person's cultivation reached the level of a half-step universe overlord, he would have no chance. Therefore, Life and Death I Sr., who had been hiding in the extraterritorial world, couldn't wait any longer. Even if he had to expose his existence, he had to seize the Life and Death Spring, the inheritance of his master Life and Death Great Master, and the great Tao of the universe at all costs. Life and Death I Sr. disappeared instantly and left the extraterritorial world. He entered the all heavens divine domain. At this moment, Yang Hongwu's heart trembled as he sensed a threat. He originally wanted to refine the Life and Death spiritual jade directly, but after sensing the threat, he immediately gave up the idea. He sealed the Life and Death spiritual jade. He opened his eyes. At this moment, the three girls looked at him and asked, "You succeeded?" Yang Hongwu nodded and said, "I've extracted the Life and Death spiritual jade and controlled a strand of it. However, I haven't refined the Life and Death spiritual jade. We don't have time. We have to leave because a great being has locked onto our location. If we don't leave, I'm afraid there will be another battle." A great being is an enemy. Hearing this, the three girls' expressions changed. After all, not every enemy they encountered would be so lucky as to be defeated. They didn't know the strength of the enemy, and only God knew how powerful and terrifying the enemy was. Therefore, after hearing this, the three girls couldn't stay calm anymore. Leaving was the best plan. Otherwise, even if they could deal with the enemy, they would suffer great losses. This wasn't something they wanted to see. Then let's get out of here quickly. Lu Yu said. Yes, there's no time to lose. Let's leave now. Zi Xintong said. Why don't you enter my inner world? Yang Hongwu said after thinking for a while. Can we? Zheng Qiushuang said. I'm fine with it. As long as I'm with you, I'll be with you forever in your inner world. No. Lu Yu shook his head and said, my strength and cultivation are too high. The amount of spiritual energy I absorb is too much. Your cultivation is still too weak. Your inner world can't bear such a huge consumption. It'll be detrimental to your cultivation. That's true. If all three of us enter your inner world, you won't be able to bear the burden. Let alone three, your inner world won't be able to support even two of us. Zi Xintong nodded. She understood this point very well. No matter how strong a sovereign's inner world was, it couldn't allow three cultivators above the Dao Lord realm to enter it. Once the limit was exceeded, it would be very troublesome. Because of this, Zi Xintong didn't agree. How about this? Let Sister Shuang enter your inner world. Zi Xintong and I will stay outside. Besides, our strength is passable. We can help you when the time comes. Lu Yu said. Zheng Qiushuang was the weakest of the three girls. In fact, it could be said that she didn't have much ambition. Her combat strength wasn't strong either. She definitely didn't want to become Yang Hongwu's weakness. Therefore, it was best for her to enter Yang Hongwu's inner world. Lu Yu and Zi Xintong were very clear about this point. All right, Yang Hongwu hesitated. He wanted to explain, but he didn't. There wasn't enough time. The enemy's speed was too fast. That feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 2199. After sending Zheng Qiushuang into common people's great world, Yang Hongwu tore through the void space, grabbed Lu Yu and Zi Xintong, and disappeared. After a few breaths, a person appeared where Yang Hongwu and the other two had disappeared. It was none other than Life and Death Eye Sr. Damn it, they escaped. Life and Death Eye Sr.'s eyes flashed coldly, and a beam of life and death light shot out from his eyes. He searched the surroundings, trying to find some clues to find where Yang Hongwu and the others had disappeared. However, it's not that easy to escape. Life and Death Eye was not a simple eye technique. It was one of the ancient god eyes, and it was extremely powerful. It was one of the most powerful eye techniques in the endless void space. Life and Death Eye Sr. was very powerful. Although he had not reached the level of a half-step universe overlord, his combat power was quite terrifying. It could be said that ordinary half-step universe overlords could not compete with him at all without a powerful true treasure of creation. He was invincible with Life and Death Eye alone. However, Life and Death Eye Sr. was afraid of his teacher's enemies. He was worried that once he appeared, he would be targeted by those terrifying great beings. Although he could rely on Life and Death Eye to fight against great Dao Knights and half-step universe overlords, he was not confident enough. He was not a pinnacle great Dao Knight. Those really powerful great Dao Knights were too powerful. For Life and Death Eye Sr., he had been hiding ever since he had escaped from death. He had been practicing in the dark, and the enemies he had encountered were not too powerful. All this time, he had not really fought with great beings because he was worried that he would expose his power. In fact, it was precisely because of this that Life and Death Eye Sr. did not pose such a great threat to Yang Hongwu. Otherwise, when Yang Hongwu first exposed the power of Life and Death Eye Sr. would have arrived. It was because Life and Death Eye Sr. was afraid of death that he hesitated for a while, and that was why Yang Hongwu could leave safely and easily. Otherwise, it would definitely be a battle of life and death. Once the battle started, it would be impossible to tell who would live and who would die. Of course, Yang Hongwu had enough confidence to protect himself because he still had the power from his previous life in his body. This power was enough to protect himself. However, Yang Hongwu was not worried about his own safety, but the safety of the three women. To Yang Hongwu, the safety of the three women was much more important than his own safety. That was why Yang Hongwu was in such a hurry to leave. Of course, as long as the three women were safe, Yang Hongwu had nothing to fear. Yang Hongwu reckoned that this person wouldn't be so easily shaken off. Moreover, the reason why he could sense him was most likely because of the life and death spirit jade. His target was the life and death spirit jade, and perhaps the life and death spring. The Eye of Life and Death was indeed very powerful. With his Eye of Life and Death, he was extremely sensitive to the power of life and death. He was able to capture a strand of Yang Hongwu's aura. You want to escape? Impossible. Boy, you're too weak. After capturing Yang Hongwu's aura, Life and Death Eye Sr. was very surprised. His opponent's aura was not as powerful as he had imagined. This made him very surprised, but also very happy at the same time. Being weak meant that his chances were high, even very high. This gave Life and Death Eye Sr. enough confidence. Even the powerful enemies that he had been worried about but had not appeared were temporarily put aside. I actually managed to capture it. Yang Hongwu was also very surprised. In fact, that strand of aura was deliberately done by Yang Hongwu. Now, his true body was leaving with the three women, leaving behind a clone to go in another direction. For Yang Hongwu, this was a danger, but also an opportunity. He wanted to lure that person into the life and death spring. The life and death spring was very powerful and overbearing. Although Yang Hongwu had refined a strand of the power of life and death, and could even refine the life and death spirit jade given enough time, it was still too dangerous. It was impossible to rely on a mere piece of life and death spirit jade to control the life and death spring. Yang Hongwu was very clear about this. It should be safe here. Yang Hongwu said to the two women after using the spatial technique for a long time. That's good. It's really very safe here. This should be the ancient access land. At this moment, Lu Yu finally got a clear look at this place. The ancient passage was a very special place. Here, one couldn't use weapons, nor could they fight. If they did, they would be directly teleported into the boundless void to an extremely dangerous place. Therefore, no one dared to be presumptuous here, not even those great beings at the level of Great Tao Knights or half-step universe overlords. All of you protect me. Yang Hongwu continued. What are you going to do? Lu Yu saw this and frowned slightly. She knew that Yang Hongwu was probably planning something. Now is not the best time to enter the space of the life and death spring. Take that person into the life and death spring. Yang Hongwu said softly and in a very indifferent tone. Are you confident? Zi Xintong asked Yang Hongwu at this moment. Entering the life and death spring was no small matter. Besides, that person dared to chase after them, which meant that he was not a weakling. I'm not 100% sure. However, my original body is here. If there's any problem, I'll send it back immediately. Nothing will happen unless the other party can directly seal my soul and completely suppress me. But that's impossible. I don't even know how strong my soul is. Someone who can suppress my soul. I'm afraid that even a universe overlord might not be able to do it in a short time. Yang Hongwu was very confident about this. Since the other party can sense the force of life and death, he must be a great being who has cultivated the path of life and death. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to sense it. It might not be a good thing to bring him into the life and death spring. Maybe he's after the life and death spring? Lu Yu was even more worried now. She knew very well that the other party must be very interested in the life and death spiritual jade, since he could sense the force of life and death and chase after them. Or rather, the life and death spiritual jade was very important to him. Otherwise, he would not have done this. The life and death spring is not so easy to deal with. Upon hearing this, Yang Hongwu smiled and said, I feel that there's a great terror in the life and death spring. I plan to stir up the water. That's true. Chapter 2200. However, Lu Yu believed that with Yang Hongwu's strength, he would definitely have the last laugh. Not only Lu Yu, but but Zi Shintong also firmly believed in this. You must be careful. If you can't do it, just come back. Zi Shintong said, don't worry. If I can't do it, I'll immediately switch and let my original body come back. After saying that, Yang Hongwu closed his eyes and sat down. His original body's consciousness was directly transferred to his doppelganger. At this time, Yang Hongwu's original body had changed and was now on a mountain peak. He was waiting for the arrival of life and death pupil venerable. In his hand was none other than the life and death spiritual jade. Since Yang Hongwu planned to scheme against life and death pupil venerable, he did not continue to conceal his aura or the power of life and death in the jade. He simply began to refine the jade. If he could completely refine it, he would have a much greater chance of success. However, Yang Hongwu knew that it would take time, and he did not have enough time. However, refining a little bit was still a little bit. At this time, life and death pupil venerable felt the power of life and death growing stronger. He was very happy. After all, it meant that it would be easier for him to obtain the inheritance of the great path of life and death. As long as he could inherit everything of his master, he would be able to become the overlord of the universe. Boy, you can't run away. If it was before, he might have been afraid. However, he had no more worries now. He had forgotten all the threats. His goal was to seize the life and death spring, seize the orthodoxy of life and death pupil venerable, and inherit the great path of life and death. Life and death pupil venerable seemed to have seen everything, including his future. He saw the time when he would become the overlord of the universe. Yang Hongwu waited for a long time. He felt the fluctuation of space and knew that the other party was coming. At this time, Yang Hongwu's eyes narrowed. The life and death spiritual jade in his hand erupted with a powerful force. This powerful force stirred up the extraterritorial space and the location of the life and death spring. In addition, Yang Hongwu used the dimension boat and his own power of the great path of space to open a space passage. This space passage was the passage to the life and death spring. Looking over from the passageway, one could only see a patch of primordial chaos within. It was ethereal and void, as though there were no signs of life at all. Instead, it was filled with an endless amount of life and death energy. In the depths of the space, there was an ancient, mysterious, and terrifying spring. This spring was constantly spewing out the power of life and death. The laws of life and death intertwined with one another, constantly devouring the power of the endless void to strengthen itself. This was the reason why the life and death spring was constantly growing and growing. Life and death was, as it was now, was comparable to a half-step universe overlord. It could be said that once one entered the life and death space of the life and death spring, as long as the opponent was not a true universe overlord great being, there was a possibility of dying in the life and death space of the life and death spring. This was the true terror of the world. Looking at the spring of life and death, Yang Hongwu could feel a frightening power. Furthermore, this power had locked onto him instantly. Yang Hongwu felt a chill run down his spine. It was a terrifying aura and a terrifying threat. It was as if he was going to die. Yang Hongwu had never had such a feeling before. It was too scary. However, Yang Hongwu was not afraid. It was just a feeling of threat. It was just that the strength of the other party was too strong and too terrifying. It gave him an illusion that he was invincible. If he could not even resist such pressure, how could he enter the life and death spring and refine his body? How could he seize the power of the life and death spring to improve himself? Therefore, Yang Hongwu took a deep breath and stabilized his spirit. His mind became incomparably firm, like an ancient mountain that could not be shaken. It was indestructible and unbreakable. His mind was as strong as steel. At this moment, life and death, venerable tore through the space and arrived. Naturally, he saw it at that moment. The location of the life and death spring. It was the life and death space of the life and death spring. This life and death spring was the place of his master's inheritance. He remembered very clearly that this was his master's original body. He did not expect that this was really his master's inheritance. He also found out that his master's original body was actually this life and death spring. This meant that this space was actually the place where his master, Grand Monarch Life and Death, had been born. However, this life and death spring shouldn't be his master's. His master had already died, and this was merely his master's original body that had been reborn. It was not the real life and death great sovereign. However, he could obtain the inheritance of the life and death great sovereign and obtain his origin. Even if it was only a part of it, it still contained terrifying power and great Tao laws and origin. This was the most important thing for life and death, I venerable. He knew very well that the power of life and death and the great Tao of life and death were very important to him. As for the origin of the life and death spring, it was not what he wanted the most. However, it would be of great help to him. If he could refine the power of life and death, his eye of life and death would be improved and evolved to an incredible level. His eye of life and death was his foundation. What he wanted to do was to integrate the life and death spring into his eye of life and death. Only then could his cultivation base and his realm be improved. Only then could he break through the shackles and bottlenecks and enter an incredible realm of cultivation, entering the level of the Tao universe, becoming a universe overlord. At this moment, Yang Hongwu stepped out and entered the space passage. The moment Yang Hongwu entered, the space passage began to close. Life and death, I venerable saw this scene and quickly stepped out. His entire body disappeared instantly. The next moment, he appeared in front of the passage. At this moment, the passage was already half closed. Life and death, I venerable, turned into a black light and followed Yang Hongwu into the passage. For Yang Hongwu, all of this was part of his plan. After entering the life and death space of the life and death spring, Yang Hongwu felt the continuous impact of the terrifying power of life and death. Streams of thoughts were filled with the power of life and death, as if they wanted to kill him. It was really terrifying. Yang Hongwu felt as if his mind was about to explode. The power of life and death seemed to have condensed the thoughts of countless powerhouses, including their obsessions to survive and their obsessions to die. However, this was not the most terrifying part of the life and death spring. This was just the beginning. The truly terrifying part was that the crazy impact of the power of life and death seemed to have turned into two ancient spears, the spear of life and the spear of death. These two spears attacked endlessly, as if his body was about to be torn apart. Chapter 22:01 Qian Qian, Nine Heavens Divine Dragon Technique. With a thought, Yang Hongwu merged the power of life and death extracted from the life and death spiritual jade with himself. With the help of the power of the life and death spiritual jade, he merged into the space of the life and death spring. With this, the pressure that Yang Hongwu felt instantly lessened. The corners of Yang Hongwu's mouth curled up into a smile. His plan had worked. At this moment, Yang Hongwu used the power of the space Great Path to enter this space and hide. At this moment, life and death, I venerable, instantly lost sight of Yang Hongwu's position. However, he did not care about Yang Hongwu at this moment. Yang Hongwu was just a sovereign realm warrior. He did not know what he had obtained to open the space of the life and death spring. However, all of this was not important to him. What he cared about was not Yang Hongwu, nor the treasure in Yang Hongwu's hand that could open the space of the life and death spring. What he wanted was the life and death spring, this space of life and death, and his master's life. The inheritance of Death Grand Master and the overlord of the life and death Tao. As long as he refined this space of life and death, seized the life and death spring, and seized the inheritance left by his master, that boy would be nothing at all. A sovereign realm warrior would absolutely not be able to compete with him for the inheritance of this space of life and death. The gap in strength was too great. Of course, life and death, I Venerable had to admit that Yang Hongwu's luck was indeed amazing. If it was an ordinary sovereign realm warrior, it would be absolutely impossible for him to escape from his pursuit. However, Yang Hongwu had done it. Moreover, he had avoided him so easily. Moreover, in this space of life and death, the attack of the power of life and death was so terrifying that he could not help but be a little surprised. However, he could also see that this was the real inheritance of the life and death great path. It was the real inheritance left by his master, life and death grandmaster. If not, how could it be so powerful, so terrifying? If it couldn't even threaten him, if it couldn't even give him the slightest bit of pressure, then this inheritance would be fake. To him, it was meaningless. It was because of the great threat that it was real and would be of great help to him. No, at this moment, life and death, I Venerable's expression suddenly changed. The spear of life and death condensed from the powerful life and death force was extremely powerful. It actually tore apart the shield he condensed. He had no choice but to dodge, but it was already too late. The overbearing impact of the force penetrated his shield. One of his arms had injured him. His blood dripped down and instantly disappeared in this space. His blood and his power had been directly devoured. Terrifying. This space was too terrifying. If it weren't for his strength and the protection of the Eye of Life and Death, he would have been in deep trouble. If it was an ordinary person, this was his life and death. Was life and death's Venerable had a life and death space was because he life and space had. Life and space. Death, life and space. Death. These people were very powerful. Although they were not universe overlords, their strength was definitely at the level of great path masters. And it was not just one person. If these people entered the life and death space, they would be a great threat to him. He could not understand why the life and death space was open at this time. Could it be because of that boy? At this moment, Yang Hongwu's appearance flashed in his mind. This boy could really do it. But if he did this, who would benefit? He was just a dominator. It was absolutely impossible for him to have any influence on the life and death spring. It was impossible for him to seize the life and death spring. Could it be that he was the reincarnation of his master, life and death great master? If this was really the case, then the possibility was very high. Could it be that he wanted to attract people into this space to steal their power and let himself recover? Thinking of this, life and death, I Venerable felt his hair stand on end. This possibility was not impossible. If that was the case, what should he do? Life and death, I Venerable was not confident enough to deal with his master. He knew his master too well. If he was not confident enough, he would not make a move. Perhaps he knew that he would definitely fall, so he deliberately set up this plan so that he could once again cultivate and rise again. However, what was happening in front of him might not be the only situation. There were still other possibilities. Of course, if his master really took advantage of this opportunity to come back again, it might not be a bad thing for him. However, if his master really came back, then it would be impossible for him to seize the life and death great master. There was no way for him to become a universe overlord. He had to find another way. However, before he could confirm this, he still had to seize the life and death spring, the space within the life and death spring, and the legacy of this world. If his master was truly still alive, then, as his only disciple, he should not be so despicable. Would he kill him? Thinking of this, life and death, I Venerable's eyes flashed coldly. No matter what, these people must die here. At this time, outside the space of the life and death spring, many great beings in the outer domain world and the void world had already discovered the existence of the life and death spring. The powerful life and death energy and the terrifying great Tao laws made them all very excited and agitated. At this level, it was difficult for their strength to improve. If they wanted to break through the bottleneck, they needed opportunities. They needed to obtain great opportunities to reach a higher level. Right in front of him, there was an opportunity. The space of the life and death spring was filled with an unparalleled power. This power was the supreme law, the power that only the overlords of the universe could control. Thus, to them, this was an exceptional opportunity. Even though they knew that this power was extremely terrifying, that there was an enormous danger in this place, and that they might die here, to them, this was still an enormous temptation. Even though they knew that this was an extremely dangerous place, and that they might die here, to them, this was still an enormous temptation. There was a slim chance of survival, but in order to find that strand of opportunity to break through, they would risk their lives to charge in. Moreover, people who had reached this level of cultivation were very confident in themselves. They thought that they were the real masters of the great path and the real masters of fate. Therefore, one by one, they swarmed toward the space of the life and death spring. They were not afraid of death. Some of them even started fighting before they reached the space of the life and death spring. Chapter 2202. A terrifying trap. The entrance of these people made life and death, venerable, worried and excited at the same time. If his master life and death great master was still alive, then these people would be cannon fodder and nourishment for his master's resurrection. However, there was also a certain risk. If his master life and death great master was not resurrected, then he would have a chance. These people would also become his biggest competitors. This was a huge challenge for life and death, venerable. After all, these people were not weak. It could be said that their cultivation was much higher than his. However, he had a great advantage here. He was hiding in the dark and had the power of life and death. From his comprehension of the great path of life and death and his eye of life and death, he could have a great advantage in this space of the life and death spring. Others would never be able to do so. Therefore, this was also where his confidence came from. No matter what the situation was, he had an advantage. However, these people in front of him, even if their cultivation was higher than his, still had no advantage. Moreover, he had a strong hunch that this time, no matter how many people came, they would all die here. This was the most terrifying and also the most worrying thing for life and death, venerable. Although the inheritance of his master life and death great master was very important to him and related to whether he could enter the realm of universe overlords, if his life was really threatened and there was no possibility of obtaining the inheritance and the life and death spring, he would give up. After all, his life was the most important thing. His cultivation had just started, and he still had a long way to go. He believed that his future achievements would definitely be much more than this. At this time, Yang Hongwu was also hiding in the dark. Seeing these great beings coming in, Yang Hongwu was very excited. However, the life and death spring seemed to be irritated and excited. This made Yang Hongwu feel that something was wrong. Previously, he had a hunch that there was a great terror in this space of life and death. What kind of existence was this great terror? Yang Hongwu even felt that it might be a universe overlord. However, what made Yang Hongwu very curious was that if it was a universe overlord, there seemed to be no need for him to hide. After all, how powerful was a universe overlord? Update: the fastest computer. / none of the people before him were a match for him. He could easily kill them all. Could it be that he was afraid of Lu Yu's master? The reason why Lu Yu was able to leave unscathed was largely because of Lu Yu's master, Furukura Daizuin. Yang Hongwu felt that if Furukura Daizuin hadn't intervened, Lu Yu probably wouldn't have been able to leave the life and death spring. The reason why the other party had allowed Lu Yu to leave was probably because of Furukura Daizuin. However, this time, the other party might not give Furukura Daizuin face and let him leave. However, Yang Hongwu wasn't afraid. He had a trump card. Moreover, if it didn't work out, he could still escape. It was just that he would use up the life-saving trump card from his previous life. To Yang Hongwu, it was a life-saving trump card. In fact, it was like a ticking time bomb. Yang Hongwu was very worried. Previously, what he said to Lu Yu and the others in his so-called previous life was true. Yang Hongwu wasn't sure at all and didn't dare to be sure. Kill. Not far away, at the entrance of the space of the life and death spring, it could be said that blood was flowing like a river. Some weak cultivators whose strength hadn't reached the level of great Tao Knight were already fighting to the death. As for some powerful warriors whose cultivation had reached the level of great Tao Knight, they had already entered the space of the life and death spring. Some people whose cultivation hadn't reached the level of great Tao Knight, but whose combat strength wasn't weak, faced the terrifying impact of the power of life and death after entering the space of the life and death spring. They couldn't resist at all, and many people died. They were directly strangled by the power of life and death and turned into a rain of blood. In an instant, they merged into the space of the life and death spring. The entire life and death spring swallowed up these vitality forces in an instant. New August 1st Chinese network. This was simply an azure slaughterhouse. It was too terrifying. However, for these great Tao Knight cultivators, seeing this scene, they didn't feel surprised at all. It was as if they had already expected it. Their eyes were filled with excitement. The power here was so strong and so overbearing that it posed a huge threat to them. However, they knew that this was the true great Tao of the universe. Only by comprehending this great Tao of the universe and obtaining the inheritance here would they have a chance to break through the bottleneck of great Tao Knight and enter the level of universe overlord. For the sake of cultivation, for the sake of improving their realm, they could do anything. If they took a step forward, they would see the vast sea and sky. If they took a step back, they would fall into a bottomless abyss. They had no choice. They knew very well that after entering the space, they had no possibility of retreating. The law of space had shackled them. Now, this space could only be entered but not exited. As great Tao Knights, they could clearly feel it. Therefore, they understood that if they wanted to survive, they could only fight. Only by truly seizing this space of the universe and obtaining the inheritance here could they survive. Moreover, only those who survived would have a chance to become overlords of the universe. This could be a conspiracy. Those who could reach such a level of cultivation were all cunning old foxes. Before entering, they had already guessed this, but they still rushed in. They didn't even hesitate much. This was because their lifespan had reached its limit, and their cultivation had also reached its limit. They didn't have much time left. Great Path Venerables were not invincible. They also had a limit to their lifespan. Although they looked very young, in fact, they were already on the verge of death. As for the young and talented Great Tao Honorables, they were still young and would not take the risk easily. Therefore, at this moment, there were still many experts in the extraterritorial realm and the world of nothingness. These young experts were all in a state of observation. They didn't need to take risks because they had enough lifespan and great talents. Therefore, they could afford to wait. They didn't need to take too many risks. They clearly knew that this could be a trap with a terrifying life and death crisis. Moreover, the possibility of death was too great. Therefore, they didn't enter. Yang Hongwu looked at these great beings. After entering this space, they were entangled by the power of life and death. Their bodies were already filled with a decaying aura, and their vitality was cut off. Terrifying. This space was really too terrifying. In the center of this space was the ancient life and death spring. It was there quietly, constantly swallowing and spitting out the power of life and death. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 2203. An imposing aura. When the spring of life and death was swallowing the power of life and death, it was constantly extracting the vitality of the cultivators who had entered the space of the spring of life and death. Their inner worlds were beginning to be eroded by the spring of life and death. It could be said to be silent. Of course, there were also some cultivators who sensed this and sealed their inner worlds. However, everything was not so simple. The moment they entered the space of the spring of life and death, everything was beyond their control. No matter what, the power of the spring of life and death was eroding their inner worlds bit by bit. When the spring of life and death's laws were truly integrated into their inner worlds, it would be the time of their death. In fact, the speed at which the spring of life and death invaded their inner worlds was extremely fast and silent. It could be done without any trace. Yang Hongwu controlled a wisp of the power of life and death, and began to comprehend the great Tao of life and death. Although he did not truly comprehend the great Tao of life and death, the Tao of yin-yang that Yang Hongwu had previously cultivated was in fact a derivative of the great Tao of life and death. The great Tao of life and death was much more powerful and domineering than the Tao of yin-yang that Yang Hongwu had cultivated. However, the Tao of yin-yang that Yang Hongwu had cultivated was greatly beneficial to his comprehension of the great Tao of life and death. Coupled with the devouring furnace that he had cultivated, this powerful superpower made it much easier to comprehend the great Tao of life and death. It was because of this that Yang Hongwu could see the situation of the experts who had entered the spring of life and death. Yang Hongwu also knew that although he was hiding in the space of the spring of life and death, his position and aura could not be hidden from the spring of life and death senses. In other words, the eyes of the terrifying expert hidden in the spring of life and death were the eyes of the terrifying expert. However, his strength was too weak. If he did not possess the life and death spiritual jade and had refined a part of its power of life and death, it would be difficult to arouse the interest of the other party. Even if he could control a wisp of the power of life and death, the other party would not be particularly interested in him. Yang Hongwu's own perception was very powerful. If he was targeted, he would be able to discover something. But now, that mysterious and powerful existence was obviously not paying attention to him. His attention was completely focused on the great beings who had barged into the space of the life and death spring. Those great beings at the level of half-step universe overlords and powerful great path knights were nothing compared to them. Even though he had the life and death spiritual jade and had begun to comprehend the laws of life and death great path, in the face of absolute power, he was nothing. Of course, all of this was just Yang Hongwu's own conjecture. As for the truth, even Yang Hongwu himself did not know. The thoughts of the strong were hard to fathom. Just like Yang Hongwu, life and death, I Venerable, was hiding in the dark. He watched the powerful Great Path Venerables enter and walk towards the life and death spring. The spring of life and death looked so mysterious and powerful in this space. It was located in the center of the entire space of life and death. The entire spring of life and death was the core of this space. The power of life and death from the spring of life and death was constantly erupting from the mouth of the spring. This power made this space even more powerful. At the same time, the entire space of the spring of life and death was constantly devouring and refining. The power in the endless void was also constantly devouring the power of the great beings who had entered the space of the spring of life and death. It was even devouring everything of these great beings. It made these great beings weaker and weaker. These great beings could clearly sense that their power was constantly being devoured. However, they were not nervous or surprised. It was as if all of this was within their expectations. On the contrary, they were all excited. They were only wary of the opponents around them. In their eyes, the other party was their enemy. They had to kill them one by one. Only by killing all of them and surviving to the end would they be the real winner. Only then would they be able to obtain the powerful inheritance and obtain the opportunity to break through the bottleneck. At this moment, there was a burst of energy in the space. The intense and terrifying fluctuations made it seem as if the entire space was about to shatter. The entire spring of life and death was shaking. In the extraterritorial realm, a terrifying aura appeared. This terrifying aura seemed to be about to shatter the entire space of the spring of life and death. Everyone's face changed drastically. Yang Hongwu looked towards the direction where the spatial fluctuation was the most intense. The space of the spring of life and death was actually collapsing. A terrifyingly huge hand shattered the space and reached in from there. This gigantic hand was filled with unparalleled power. It was as though the entire universe was under the control of this gigantic hand. In the face of such a terrifying power, Yang Hongwu felt that he was as insignificant as a speck of dust. Even if he was at his peak state, even if Yang Hongwu had broken through the limit and entered the level of a great Down Knight, he would still be so insignificant in the face of this giant hand. He would be so weak that he would not be able to withstand a single blow. As the giant hand continued to penetrate deeper and seemed to be about to grab the spring of life and death, a powerful aura appeared from the spring of life and death. This powerful aura was a giant wheel of life and death. The aura that erupted from this wheel of life and death was equally imposing, equally terrifying, and equally majestic. It was so powerful and domineering that no one could look directly at it. The wheel of life and death instantly slammed into the giant hand. The giant hand instantly clenched into a fist and unleashed a blow that collided with the wheel of life and death. The two forces exploded, and a terrifying impact spread out in all directions. It spread throughout the entire space of the spring of life and death. In the face of this powerful force, these great beings who were half-step universe overlords actually joined forces to resist the impact of this terrifying force. More than a dozen great beings who were half-step universe overlords could only barely resist the aftermath of the impact of these two powerful forces. Yang Hongwu hid in the distance and activated his devouring furnace to the extreme. He also exerted the strength of his body to the extreme. However, under the impact of this terrifying aftermath, Yang Hongwu felt that his body was about to collapse. This force was too powerful and domineering. Was this the true power of a universe overlord? Yang Hongwu laughed bitterly in his heart. His enemy was actually so powerful. His current strength was too weak. He was really too weak to withstand a single blow. When the aftermath dissipated, the giant hand and the wheel of life and death had already turned into nothingness and dissipated in this space. However, the space crack still did not disappear. Outside the space crack, an incomparably majestic aura was still exuding from it. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 2204. Life and Death. Old Ghost, you finally showed up. I've been looking for you for so many years, but I didn't expect you to be hiding here. I'm really surprised, said a loud and majestic voice from outside the space. Everyone present could not even stand steadily when they heard this voice. This terrifying power of the Great Path was not something they could contend with. This time, everyone present was regretting their decision. They did not expect such a terrifying great being to appear. The other party's strength was definitely at the level of a universe overlord. Otherwise, with their strength of half-step universe overlords, it was absolutely impossible for them to not even be able to contend with the other party's words. Such strength had already reached an extremely powerful level. It was not something they could contend with at all. Compared to them, even if there was only a gap of half a realm, it was still a world of difference. The gap was simply too big. This gap, which seemed like a gap of 1 foot, could not be made up for. It was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross. However, at this moment, they were regretful. There was no point in regretting. Whether or not they could survive was still a question. They originally had a chance. At least they thought so. This was their hope. Now, a great being at the level of a universe overlord had appeared and made a move on the spring of life and death. And this spring of life and death was hiding a terrifying being. This terrifying being was a great being at the level of a universe overlord. This meant that they did not stand a chance at all. In fact, the reason why they could enter this place was most likely that the great being at the level of a universe overlord had done on purpose. Of course, in reality, it was not that they did not stand a chance. Obviously, the universe overlord outside the space and the great being in the spring of life and death in this space were not on good terms. The two great beings were obviously enemies. If the two of them were to fight, the outcome would not be certain. However, it would be best if both of them suffered great losses. This was the outcome that they wanted the most. The great being's voice was transmitted into the space, but there was no response. Instead, a powerful force of law erupted from the spring of life and death, forming a huge mountain. This huge mountain flew toward the space crack, as if it wanted to suppress the crack and drive the great being out. Life and death, you underestimate me too much. Do you think you can force me away with this little bit of ability? That voice rang out once more. One could only see a beam of light bursting out from the void. This beam of light was filled with terrifying energy. In an instant, it pierced a hole through the mountain. The force of life and death was instantly dispersed. Such power was simply too terrifying. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to withstand it at all. However, after the mountain shattered, the life and death force did not disperse. Instead, it gathered once again and formed an ancient and majestic millstone. It was the great millstone of life and death. The moment the great millstone of life and death appeared, Yang Hongwu could feel the wisp of life and death power within his body. The millstone of life and death that he cultivated began to stir. This was due to the attraction of the great millstone of life and death. This was the true great millstone of life and death. Its power was unimaginable and tyrannical. The life and death spirit jade under Yang Hongwu's control seemed to want to fly away at this moment. The force of life and death in the surroundings gathered madly toward the great millstone of life and death. What an impressive great millstone of life and death. No wonder it's one of the most powerful great paths of the universe. No wonder it's your trump card. Powerful, truly powerful. A majestic and imposing voice rang out from the endless void. It was filled with emotion. Die! A domineering and destructive voice rang out from the great millstone of life and death. The entire great millstone of life and death seemed to have transformed into a millstone that wanted to destroy everything. Wherever it went, all obstacles were crushed. The two great beings at the half-step universe overlord level who couldn't dodge in time were unable to move at all. They were directly crushed into nothingness. Such a scene caused the other experts to tremble in fear. They couldn't escape, and they would die if they stayed. Despair and fear had already occupied their minds, and all their thoughts were occupied. They didn't know what to do. As great beings at the half-step universe overlord level, when had they ever been so aggrieved? However, this was the reality. Everything that had happened before was just their wishful thinking. It was just a dream. Now, the reality was too cruel. It was so cruel that it was hard for them to accept. This was the reality, the real reality. Yang Hongwu, who was hiding in the dark, was also shocked. This kind of power was really unimaginable. All this time, Yang Hongwu had been imagining how powerful a battle between universe overlords would be. How terrifying it would be, how powerful it would be, and how shocking its destructive power would be. However, only now did he realize that he had greatly underestimated a battle between universe overlords. The great millstone of life and death crushed everything in its path. Everything was crushed and swallowed. Nothing could stop it. Originally, in the space crack, a shadow of nothingness was pulled out by the great millstone of life and death. This shadow was not a human, but a great being at the universe overlord level. Or rather, this was just an avatar of a universe overlord. This wasn't his original body. If it was his original body, its power would definitely be much more powerful. Life and death, this time, you've won, but I won't let you go. Your power is far from recovered. Although you hid well in the universe of that little fellow, ancient desolation, I still found you. However, do you think you're safe now? The voice of the shadow was heard. You're too naive. That little fellow, ancient desolation, may be very talented and powerful, but he can't even protect himself now. His universe is about to collapse. When that happens, he'll definitely die. Once he dies, you'll have no place to hide. You won't be able to escape. Do you understand? Die. The great millstone of life and death didn't give any other answer. It only said one word. Haha, I'm just an avatar. Life and death. You won't be able to escape the pursuit of my original body." The next moment, the shadow transformed into a bolt of black lightning. Its speed was unbelievably fast. "This avatar of mine will definitely die. However, your last disciple will also die. I can't kill you, but killing your disciple won't be a problem." As soon as the voice came out, Yang Hongwu was shocked. Was it looking for him? However, when Yang Hongwu found out the target, he heaved a sigh of relief. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 2205. The changes of the Dharma Eye of Annihilation as target turned out to be the life and death Eye Venerable. Yang Hongwu initially thought that his target was himself. After all, he had comprehended a wisp of the power of life and death. More importantly, he had also comprehended the great millstone of life and death. If he revealed that he had nothing to do with the life and death spring, no one would believe him. Of course, the moment the mysterious expert said those words, life and death pupil Venerable also felt a great sense of crisis. He knew very well that the mysterious expert was referring to him. His master was the life and death great sovereign. That meant that he was the life and death great sovereign. The mysterious expert. The expert was his master's enemy. The life and death Eye Venerable had never thought that things would develop to this point. This was not what he wanted to see at all. It was also something he had not expected at all. In the face of such a powerful and terrifying existence who wanted to kill him, he was not willing to die just like that. Naturally, he wanted to resist and survive. Therefore, the moment the mysterious expert made his move, he also made his move. He revealed his most powerful trump card. It was the life and death eye. The power of the life and death eye was unleashed to the extreme in an instant. In the face of such a terrifying and overbearing attack, the life and death Eye Venerable did not hesitate. He could only raise his power to the extreme to resist this powerful and overbearing attack. At that moment, a loud bang was heard. The world seemed to be collapsing. This space seemed to be collapsing completely in front of this terrifying power. It could be seen how terrifying the destructive power of this attack was. How terrifying was it? How terrifying was this attack? How terrifying was it? It was ferocious. In the distance, Yang Hongwu was very shocked. If the mysterious expert's target was really him, could he really resist it? The result was absolutely foreseeable. With his own strength, he simply could not resist such a powerful attack. Only the power in his body could resist such a mighty force. Otherwise, he would definitely die. There was no other possibility. The life and death I didn't expect your disciple to be so talented and have such a strong foundation. No wonder you took him in as your last disciple. You hit it so well. The mysterious expert was obviously surprised that he did not kill the life and death Eye Venerable with one attack, but it was also within his expectations. It was not surprising that the life and death Eye Venerable had such a disciple. He was only an avatar, so it was reasonable that he could not really kill him. However, he could not kill him. However, it did not mean that he could not destroy his opponent. No matter how outstanding the other party's talent was, how strong his talent was, and how solid his foundation was, his level of cultivation was not that of a universe overlord. As long as his level of cultivation was not that of a universe overlord, then he would not be able to become one. Then, he would have a way to deal with him. Even if he couldn't kill him, he could still easily destroy his foundation and bring down his cultivation. However, the moment the life and death eye appeared, he changed his mind. Of course, such a powerful thing like the life and death eye could not be destroyed easily. If his original body was here, he might be able to completely destroy the life and death eye. However, he was only an avatar, so he could not do it. The person in front of him with the life and death eye was probably a hidden card that the life and death Eye Venerable had deliberately taken in as a disciple. Back then, Grand Sovereign Life and Death had been besieged by them. His origin, foundation, and great Tao had been destroyed. As a result, although Grand Sovereign Life and Death hadn't died completely, it wouldn't be easy for him to come back to life and rise again. First, he had to gather his origin, restore it, and rebuild his foundation. His foundation was still incomplete. The eye of life and death would refine his foundation and even strengthen it. The life and death eye could be the key to making him go to the next level. Therefore, he knew very well that the reason why the life and death great master had cultivated such a disciple was probably because he had calculated this day and wanted to come back. If he could really merge with the life and death eye and rebuild his foundation, he would be able to come back again. This was because his strength would most likely be even stronger than before. At that time, it would be impossible for them to kill Grand Monarch Life and Death again. No one knew better than him how terrifying a universe overlord was when he came back. When one's cultivation reached the level of a universe overlord, if one's great path and foundation were to be destroyed, one could still come back and rise again. How terrifying would that be? Their power would truly reach the level of destruction before reestablishment. Being a universe overlord was not about cultivation. At the end of the world, there were more powerful beings above universe overlords. That was the real peak. Now, he guessed that the life and death great master was probably trying to break through the limit and break through the realm of universe overlords to reach a higher level. That was why the life and death great master had been besieged in the battle with them. He had left his foundation behind, but it was not completely destroyed. This was to pave the way for his rebirth. The little guy in front of him with the life and death, I was probably part of the scheme of the life and death great master. Furthermore, he discovered something interesting. There was another person in this space. Although this person looked weak and was only at the ruler realm, he had also comprehended a strand of the life and death force. Furthermore, this person was a ruler realm cultivator. He had even faintly comprehended the millstone of life and death. If it weren't for the fact that there was another force in the little guy's body, another powerful great path of origin, he would have thought that the little guy was the reincarnation of the life and death great master. Originally, he wanted to knock down the eye of life and death directly, but he couldn't completely destroy it. He could only cause the eye of life and death's origin to collapse for a period of time. Given enough time, great sovereign life and death could recover it. Now his goal had changed. The little guy who had comprehended the millstone of life and death, and whose cultivation was only at the Dominator realm, was an interesting person. He could help him. With his thought, he moved. The life and death I was forcibly extracted from the body of the life and death I great master by his powerful force. However, only a part of it was left. After all, he was only an avatar. The life and death I was the strongest in the great thousand universe. It was one of the most powerful divine eyes in the universe. The part of the life and death eye that was extracted turned into a ray of light in his hand and flew toward Yang Hongwu. With the last of his strength, he forcibly integrated it into Yang Hongwu's body. The moment the life and death eye integrated into Yang Hongwu's body, the Dharma eye of annihilation in Yang Hongwu's body moved and erupted in an instant, directly integrating the life and death eye into it. The Dharma eye of annihilation had undergone an astonishing change. The original Dharma eye of annihilation was filled with endless destructive power, but now, after integrating with the life and death eye, it was filled with vitality, a powerful vitality. Book House Reading Website. Chapter 2206. Achieving the eyes of life. This life force directly increased the power of Yang Hongwu's Dharma eye of annihilation by several times. Moreover, the most important thing was not the increase in power, but the change in nature of the Dharma eye of annihilation. It was no longer a simple Dharma eye of annihilation. With the power of life, the Dharma eye of annihilation was no longer purely destructive. This meant that his Dharma eye of annihilation would be difficult to detect even if it was used. Perhaps his current Dharma eye of annihilation could no longer be called the Dharma eye of annihilation. It should be renamed the Eyes of Life. Yang Hongwu decided to change the name of his Dharma eye of annihilation to the Eyes of Life. Although it was not as domineering as the Dharma Eye of Annihilation, this name had more vitality. It was very compatible with the current situation. Moreover, the current eyes of life could be integrated into his own common people's great world. In this way, his common people's great world would receive the greatest upgrade. The eyes of life could directly devour any energy outside of the common people's great world to upgrade the common people's great world. The improvement of the common people great world would also greatly improve the eyes of life and make it more powerful. However, Yang Hongwu's strength did not improve. This time, because of the help of the universe overlord, his eyes of life had improved greatly. This was a huge benefit for him. However, this was not a good thing for Life and Death Eye Elder. Although Life and Death Eye Elder had not been killed, most of the origin of his Eye of Life and Death had been extracted, and his strength had dropped. At this moment, his cultivation had dropped to the level of Tao Lord. Compared to before, his strength was much weaker. Previously, he could fight against those half-step universe overlords with his Eye of Life and Death. However, it was impossible for him to do so now. Once he encountered a half-step universe overlord or even a pinnacle Tao master, he would not be able to deal with them. Moreover, he was also seriously injured. Although his life was not in danger, if this continued, he would really be killed. Damn bastard. At this moment, a very majestic and angry voice came from the spring of life and death. A terrifying aura enveloped Yang Hongwu's location. Yang Hongwu's expression changed. This aura most likely belonged to the life and death great monarch. He was the great sovereign of life and death who had given him the power of the Eye of Life and Death. He was definitely a great being at the level of a universe overlord. He was the true master of this space, the master of the life and death spring. This kind of power was really not something that he could contend against. It seemed that this time, it was impossible for him to keep the trump card from his previous life. Yang Hongwu closed his eyes and did not intend to resist. After all, with his current level of cultivation, although he was very powerful in front of ordinary people, in the face of a great being at the level of a true universe overlord, this little bit of power was far from enough to put him in their eyes. Since he knew that there was no point in resisting, he could only wait for the power within his body to erupt. That power should be able to contend against the master of the life and death spring. After killing the enemy outside the space, the great sovereign of life and death's terrifying aura locked onto Yang Hongwu, but did not fall and did not attack Yang Hongwu. This surprised Yang Hongwu. Boy, get out of here. Today, I'll spare you for that guy's sake. But you must remember that you owe me a favor. At this moment, the majestic voice rang out in Yang Hongwu's ears once again. A figure appeared before Yang Hongwu. Although he couldn't be seen clearly, his imposing aura was extremely unique. His entire being was surrounded by a powerful force of life and death. This was definitely an unparalleled expert. It was just that his cultivation base had yet to recover. Edited by Lifer. Fingerfox. Yang Hongwu was not sure who this guy was talking about. Was he talking about Lu Yu's master, Furukura Daizuan? Or was he talking about his previous life? However, this was not so important to Yang Hongwu. What he wanted was for him to be safe and sound and be able to leave. However, although he had obtained great benefits from this trip, allowing his Dharma Eye of Annihilation to be integrated into his common people's great world and become the common people's eyes, he had not achieved his true goal. The reason why he entered this space and took a huge risk was because he wanted to obtain the life and death spring. He wanted to enter the life and death spring to refine his physical body so that it could break through the limit and enter a higher level. Apart from a life and death spring, Yang Hongwu really could not think of any other place that could make his body break the limit and break the bottleneck. According to what Lu Yu and the others had said, or what he had said in his previous life, if he could not break the limit of his body and make his body stronger, then his cultivation realm would not be able to go any further. At least, he would not be able to make a big improvement in a short period of time. This meant that he could not raise his cultivation realm to the level of Great Tao Master or even to the level of Tao Master in a few hundred years. This was a huge problem. In this way, if his cultivation realm could not be raised and his strength could not be improved, how could he deal with his enemies in the future? Yang Hongwu knew very well that each of his enemies was very powerful. It could even be said that each of them was not inferior to Furukura Daizuan or the peerless expert in front of him. Moreover, it was not just one of them, but a group of such experts. Therefore, Yang Hongwu was not willing to let Yang Hongwu leave so easily. He could also see that the life and death Grandmaster in front of him was very afraid of him. He seemed to have seen through some of his origins and was afraid that he could not do anything to him. If he entered the life and death spring to practice, he might be able to do it. What? You're not willing? Seeing Yang Hongwu like this, the life and death Grandmaster was really annoyed. If he could, he really wanted to kill this boy in front of him directly. This boy had taken advantage of him too much. If he was not afraid of the person behind him and the terrible power in his body, how could the life and death Grandmaster speak to a warrior of the Dominator realm in such a way? A warrior of the Dominator realm was not qualified to talk to a master of the universe Overlord realm, no matter how outstanding his talent was. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 2207. A presumptuous request. Senior, I have a presumptuous request, and I hope you can agree to it, Yang Hongwu said, looking at life and death Great Master. Since it's a presumptuous request, don't say anything and get out of here. Otherwise, I won't be polite. Life and death Great Master didn't like Yang Hongwu at all. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't fight, he would have beaten Yang Hongwu to death. Now, this little bastard actually dared to negotiate terms with him. He was simply courting death. Teacher, you can't let him go, Life and Death Great Master said. Most of the origin of my Eye of Life and Death has fallen on him. You can't let him go like this. You're a piece of trash. Life and Death Great Master was furious when he heard what Life and Death Great Master said. This boy was really a piece of trash. After so many years, he hadn't made any progress. He hadn't even found what he had left for him. Because he didn't dare to leave the extraterritorial world, he had been hiding. Unfortunately, he had exposed himself the moment he came out. He couldn't be more useless. If he hadn't taken a fancy to his Eye of Life and Death, he wouldn't have accepted such a disciple. Just looking at him made him angry. Master! At that moment, the Life and Death Eye Exalted was also somewhat stunned. He had never imagined that his master, the Life and Death Exalted, would treat him in such a manner. He truly felt wronged. However, he didn't dare to refute. He knew his teacher's temper very well. If he continued to be long-winded, he was afraid he would be beaten again. It was even possible that he would be killed. Life and Death Great Master's temper was really terrible. In particular, under such circumstances, Life and Death Great Master's temper was the most eccentric. In fact, the Life and Death Grand Monarch was extremely annoyed at the moment. He was currently stuck in a dilemma. Originally, if he had followed his plan, he would have swallowed the great beings at the level of half-step universe overlords who had entered from the outer domain world and the void world. Then, he would have been able to increase his strength by quite a bit. Then, he would have seized a part of the origin of life and death, Elder's Eye of Life and Death, and integrated it into his own origin of life and death. Then, he would have been able to recover his origin completely. However, all of this was impossible now because most of the origin of life and death, Elder, had been extracted and integrated into his own origin of life and death. It had entered Yang Hongwu's body, but it was impossible for him to extract it from his body. There were two reasons why he couldn't do anything to him. First, it was because of Ancient Desolation's Supreme Sovereign. This was his territory after all. He was under the protection of Ancient Desolation Supreme Sovereign. His strength hadn't recovered yet. Compared to Ancient Desolation Supreme Sovereign, his strength was far inferior. Second, this kid who seemed to be in the Sovereign Realm should be the reincarnation of a Supreme Expert. There was an extremely powerful and domineering force in his body. Even when he was at his peak, he wouldn't be able to resist this force. He was afraid. Therefore, it wasn't that he didn't want to make a move, but that he couldn't. Once he made a move against Yang Hongwu, he would probably face a devastating blow. Perhaps everything he had now would be turned into water. It would become a source of power for this kid who was at the sovereign realm to improve his cultivation. Therefore, although he couldn't wait to cut Yang Hongwu into pieces, he couldn't do anything. He wanted to, but he couldn't. As a great being at the level of a universe overlord, there was nothing he could do to a martial artist at the level of a ruler. This made him feel extremely aggrieved. However, when he looked at life and death great master, he frowned slightly. This kid was the key to his recovery of origin. Although most of the origin of his eye of life and death had been extracted by Yang Hongwu, there was only a small portion left. However, it wasn't impossible to recover it. He just needed enough resources and time. At least, it was much faster than directly devouring and refining a portion of the origin of his eye of life and death to recover his own life and death great master. Therefore, life and death great master couldn't die yet. He sighed in his heart and scolded life and death great master. However, he still threw out a ball of energy toward life and death great master. After the ball of energy merged with life and death great master's body, his injuries immediately recovered by more than half. Although his injuries had recovered significantly, it was impossible for his origin source to recover in a short period of time. He didn't know how long it would take for this part of his origin to recover. This made life and death great master feel very helpless. He looked at Yang Hongwu, and his eyes were full of resentment. However, he didn't dare to act rashly. After all, he wasn't a fool. Even his master was afraid of this kid in front of him and didn't dare to act rashly. If he attacked him now, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Yes, however, he was very curious. What was the origin of this brat? Even his own master was so afraid of him. It seemed that he was right not to act rashly back then. If he had directly acted against that brat, would he be able to survive now? It was still a problem. Thank you, master. Since his injuries had recovered a lot, it was all thanks to his master, Furukawa Daizuan. He quickly stood up and bowed to his master, Furukawa Daizuan. At this moment, he understood the importance of having a strong backer. Although he had once suspected that his master might have some special reasons for his purpose, or that he could still be used by his master, he still felt that his master had some use for him. However, this was not the case. At the very least, he was still too weak at the moment. Before he obtained enough strength, he had no choice at all. There was no possibility of resistance. This was the sorrow of the weak. Weakness was the original sin. Strength was the truth. Although he understood this point very well, it was too difficult to become strong enough to ignore all rules and obstacles. Even his teacher, a great being at the level of a universe overlord, could not achieve such a feat at this moment. Yang Hongwu looked at the master and disciple in front of him. For Yang Hongwu, the current life and death pupil venerable was nothing to be afraid of. If the life and death pupil venerable dared to attack, Yang Hongwu could even directly draw out the essence of the life and death pupil venerable's life and death pupil venerable with the power of the life and death pupil venerable. In this way, even if the life and death pupil venerable's life and death pupil venerable could not improve his life and death pupil venerable's life and death pupil venerable, it would still be beneficial to him. It was not a difficult task, but it would take some time and pay a small price. The only person he was afraid of was the life and death great sovereign in front of him. He was a real expert. Even if he had not recovered, his strength was still very terrifying. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 2208. Terms of exchange. If Great Master Life and Death really wanted to fight him to the death, Yang Hongwu was not confident that he would be able to contend with him. After all, Great Master Life and Death was a master at the level of a universe overlord. If that happened, Yang Hongwu might have to give up some things. Of course, Yang Hongwu was really unwilling to leave this place now. After all, he hadn't gotten what he wanted yet. If he just left like this, he would really be unwilling to accept it. Senior, I would like to borrow Senior's life and death spring to refine my body. To Senior, this is only a small matter. Furthermore, I will not let Senior suffer a loss. I am willing to pay a price to exchange with Senior. Yang Hongwu looked at Life and Death Great Master. Since he couldn't fight to the death with Life and Death Great Master, he could only negotiate terms. It would be best if he could solve the problem without fighting, but he would have to pay a price. Of course, if Life and Death Great Master chose to exchange something, or if the price he had to pay was too high, it would be completely unnecessary. Is that so? Life and Death Great Master looked at Yang Hongwu. As a universe overlord, although he hadn't recovered his cultivation, he knew very well that Yang Hongwu's foundation had reached a terrifying level. No one could have such a terrifying foundation at the Dominator level. Therefore, it would be very difficult for him to make a breakthrough. As for refining his body, he knew very well that Yang Hongwu's foundation was too strong. If his body wasn't strong enough, it wouldn't be able to withstand such a powerful force. Therefore, if he wanted to continue to improve his cultivation, he had to break through the limits of his body and make it stronger. In particular, if he wanted to break through to the universe overlord level, his body had to reach an incredible level. It was too difficult for such a person to break through to become a universe overlord, but it was not impossible. If he could really break through to become a universe overlord, then he would definitely be invincible among the universe overlords. An invincible overlord. In the past, Life and Death Great Master would never want to see such a powerful genius grow up, especially one who might become an invincible overlord. This was a huge threat to him. After all, no one wanted to see an overlord who was much stronger than himself. However, the Life and Death Great Monarch had changed his mind. Soon, in the endless void and the countless universes, there would be a real battle of the Great Era. Countless great beings would rise, and among these great beings, there would be countless terrifying beings. There might even be beings who surpass the universe overlords. As for Life and Death Great Master, his cultivation hadn't recovered yet, and it would take too long for him to fully recover. Even with the help of the Eye of Life and Death's origin, it was still too difficult for him to truly recover his peak. It wasn't something that could be done in a day. Furthermore, he had a lot of enemies. That guy just now was one of his many sworn enemies, Supreme Monarch Redleaf. Among his many enemies, Great Master Redleaf cultivation was only in the middle, and he wasn't the strongest at all. Great Master Redleaf had already discovered his location, and he would definitely find this place. Furukura Daizuin wouldn't fight against these powerful universe overlords for his sake. If it were Life and Death Great Master Redleaf, he wouldn't do that either. After all, his relationship with Furukura Daizuin was just mutual benefit. Besides, this kid in front of him had terrifying luck. The powerful and overbearing force in his body wasn't something Life and Death Great Master Redleaf was willing to touch. If he really activated that force, Life and Death Great Master Redleaf's world would probably collapse. By then, there would be no possibility for him to return to his peak. However, if he were to agree to this lad's request and help him refine his physical body, his spring of life and death would probably consume a huge amount of energy. In fact, a portion of his spring of life and death might even be plundered by this lad. This was a huge problem. If he didn't agree, this kid didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Life and Death Great Master Redleaf couldn't force him to leave. He sent Lin Fan away. Lin Fan still had a special energy on him. That energy was too special and too strange, which made him even more wary. Of course. What do you need, Senior? As long as it's within my means. Yang Hanwu couldn't help but ask when he saw Life and Death Great Master wavering. What I need is not difficult, Life and Death Great Master Redleaf said. Given your current cultivation, there's nothing on you that's worth coveting. I want you to agree to one condition. Yang Hongwu was very surprised. He had thought that Life and Death Great Master Redleaf would ask for a lot, and Yang Hongwu was even prepared to bleed. He didn't expect Life and Death Great Master Redleaf to make such a request. But in fact, this was the most difficult thing for Yang Hongwu, who knew what Life and Death Great Master Redleaf would ask for. This was not a negotiation with an ordinary person. For a universe overlord like Life and Death Great Master, once a condition was set, it was almost impossible to change it. Once the contract was broken, the consequences would be very serious. Senior, please say it. If I can do it, I won't refuse. Yang Hongwu said. When Life and Death Great Master heard Yang Hongwu's words, he was very excited. He wanted to ask his Master Life and Death Great Master for a part of his Life and Death Great Master Redleaf's origin. However, he didn't say anything in the end. He knew very well that if he dared to interrupt at this time, he would probably not have a good end. Under normal circumstances, a cultivator of the sovereign realm was not qualified to talk to his master, Life and Death Great Sovereign. But now, this boy was actually able to negotiate with his master. How powerful was his origin? At this moment, Yang Hongwu was becoming more and more mysterious and powerful in the eyes of Life and Death Great Master. Maybe it wasn't a bad thing that Yang Hongwu took away a part of his Life and Death Great Master Redleaf. Yang Hongwu had obtained a part of the origin of Luo Feng's Eye of Life and Death, which meant that he owed Luo Feng karma. If Yang Hongwu was really that powerful, the karma he owed Luo Feng would be of great help to Luo Feng in the future. If Yang Hongwu could become a universe overlord, and a very powerful one at that, he would eventually have to repay Luo Feng karma. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2209. Life and Death Threat. My condition is very simple. I only need 1/10 of your future luck. The Life and Death Threat said. Yang Hongwu squinted his eyes when he heard this. It was indeed not simple. Luck was illusory, but sometimes it might not be a good thing to agree to it. Moreover, it was 1/10 of his future luck. Such a thing could not be agreed easily. If it had been something else, Yang Hongwu might not have considered it too much. However, luck was something that Yang Hongwu had to consider seriously. After all, it was an extremely mysterious thing. Moreover, when one's cultivation base reached a certain level, luck would become even more important. In addition, Yang Hongwu had felt uneasy when he had heard the Life-Death Great Venerate mention such a condition. Therefore, this was definitely not a good thing. It was definitely disadvantageous to him. Yang Hongwu completely believed in his intuition. This meant that his luck could not be exchanged. Perhaps if he lost this part of his luck, he might lose even more opportunities. However, if he did not exchange, there might be a way to refine his physical body and improve it to the next level. Moreover, even if he did not agree to the exchange, was there no other way to get an opportunity to refine his physical body from the Life and Death Threat? He was determined to get the Life and Death Spring. If the Life and Death Threat was not willing, then he might have to come up with a plan. Thinking of this, Yang Hongwu's eyes flickered coldly. Yang Hongwu did not have a good impression of the Life and Death Threat. He knew very well that the Life and Death Threat wanted to kill him. If it had not been for some special reasons, the Life and Death Threat would have already attacked him. Therefore, now that the Life and Death Threat had made such a request, Yang Hongwu could not agree. If he attacked, it was unknown whether he would live or die. In fact, the Life and Death Threat was not that scary. He still had enemies, powerful enemies. The Life and Death Threat was not at his peak. He was still under the protection of Furukura Daizuan, who was Lu Yu's master. Yang Hongwu did not think that Furukura Daizuan would let the Life and Death Threat deal with him. Moreover, he still had a trump card. His strength in his previous life was very strong. He was at least a universe overlord. How could the power left behind by him be so simple? Even if he could not defeat the Life and Death Threat, there should be no problem in escaping, right? After all, his incarnation was still in the outside world. Once he encountered any problems, he could use the one Qi into 3 pure ones to switch between his true body and incarnation and escape. This was absolutely not a problem. Yang Hongwu was very confident about this. What, boy? You don't want to? The life and death threat was displeased when he saw Yang Hongwu's expression. He looked at Yang Hongwu and said, "If you don't want to, then get out of here. Senior, is there no room for negotiation?" Yang Hongwu narrowed his eyes and looked at the life and death threat. He knew that the life and death threat had reached the limit of his patience. After all, anyone else would have done the same. After all, the life and death threat was a universe overlord, while Yang Hongwu was just a small practitioner of the ruler realm. Compared to the life and death threat, he was like an ant that could be killed with a breath. However, he was a little special and could not be crushed so easily. That was why the life and death threat was so apprehensive. However, life and death great master wanted his fate, so he must have known something. To any universe overlord, 1/10 of one's fate meant a lot, and it was very, very frightening. It was even more frightening than losing 1/10 of one's cultivation. Losing one's cultivation could be cultivated back, but once one's luck was lost, it would cause a series of changes and a series of chain reactions. When that happened, it would be far more than just losing a little bit of luck. Yang Hongwu's cultivation had not reached that level yet, so he still had a vague idea about luck. In fact, when one's cultivation reached the level of a universe overlord, fate was very important. If the fate of a universe was strong enough, then this universe could give birth to countless great beings with extraordinary talents, making this universe more and more powerful. In the endless void, these countless universes were located in a very special part of the void. This part of the void seemed endless, and no one knew what was at the end of it. However, if the masters of these universes or universe masters and universe overlords were lucky enough, their universes would continue to grow and become more powerful, and their strength would continue to improve. However, if they lost their luck, they might encounter terrifying enemies. After all, in this endless void, there were not only universe overlords, but also other terrifying creatures. These creatures did not have universes. They only had killing and destruction. They were the legendary Slaughterer and Destroyer. Of course, that was not all. It was just that these two creatures were particularly famous. "You still want to negotiate with me?" The life and death threat said coldly. "That's all I want. There are no other possibilities. If you don't want to, I'll send you away. Senior, I came here to refine my body. If I don't succeed, I won't leave. As for sending me away, I'm afraid you can't do it." Yang Hongwu said coldly. He was determined to get the life and death spring. If he could not even deal with the weakened life and death threat, how could he deal with the more powerful enemies? Yang Hongwu didn't dare to imagine how terrifying and powerful his future enemies would be. However, he was absolutely certain that his enemies wouldn't be weaker than Great Venerate Life and Death. In fact, they would be much more terrifying than Great Venerate Life and Death, whose cultivation base had yet to recover. Moreover, his enemy was far from being as simple as one. Therefore, he had to work hard and think of ways to improve his cultivation. Even if he faced the life and death threat, he would not be afraid. He had too many enemies, and they were all so powerful. Therefore, it was not a big deal to have one more great sovereign life and death. After all, one more great sovereign life and death was not a big deal, and one less great sovereign life and death was not a big deal. "Boy, are you threatening me?" Hearing this, the life and death threat flew into a rage. He was a universe overlord, but he was being threatened by an ant at the Dominator realm. It would be a great disgrace if word got out. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 2210. Furukura Daizuin showed up. Threatening, Yang Hongwu said, shaking his head. "Senior, you must be joking. How would I dare to threaten you?" Yang Hongwu was not stupid enough to threaten a great being at the level of a universe overlord. Of course, now that things had come to this point, even if it was not a threat, it was not far from it. After all, he needed the help of the life and death spring, and great exalted life and death would not give up the life and death spring. He was afraid that he would have a fight with life and death grandmaster. "Boy, you talk big. You're just a ruler. I don't know where you get the courage to be so presumptuous in front of me. Do you know that you're facing a universe overlord? Life and Death Great Master was infuriated. That damn brat. Although he said that he didn't dare to threaten him, the tone of his voice was clearly threatening him. The threat was simply too strong. This made Life and Death Grandmaster want to kill him directly. However, Life and Death Grandmaster did not dare to, because he did not dare to take the risk. Life and Death Grandmaster was not an ordinary person. He was, after all, a universe overlord. He knew very well that at this moment, even if he attacked with all his strength, he would not be able to kill this boy. Not only could he not kill him, but he would also go for wool and come home shorn. This was very disadvantageous for him. At their level of cultivation, they already had the perception to seek fortune and avoid calamity. However, sometimes, even though they knew that danger was coming, they couldn't avoid it. But now, it was completely possible to avoid it. That was why he treated Yang Hongwu with respect. He had to endure it again and again. As a universe overlord, it was very frustrating to encounter such a situation, but he had no other choice. Life and Death Master, who was standing to the side, saw that his master was so patient with Yang Hongwu that he could not help but want to attack him directly. If it were him, as a universe overlord, it would be unbearable for him to be so scrupulous in front of a universe overlord. Of course, Life and Death Master admired and envied Yang Hongwu. He was only at the level of a ruler, yet a great being at the level of a universe overlord could do nothing to him. He didn't even dare to attack him. This was simply unbelievable. If he had dared to provoke a great being at the level of a universe overlord, he would have been beaten to death tens of thousands of times already. Universe overlords are indeed very powerful, Yang Hongwu said, looking at Life and Death Great Master. Of course I know that. Senior, you're a great being at the level of a universe overlord. There's no doubt about that. I have no doubts about that. I'm afraid that my cultivation hasn't recovered yet. Moreover, this isn't your territory. You're just living under someone else's roof. Yang Hongwu's words could be said to be heart-wrenching. Sure enough, Life and Death Great Master was furious when he heard Yang Hongwu's words. A terrifying aura burst out from his body, and the whole space seemed to be about to be destroyed. It could be seen how angry Life and Death Great Master was at this moment. Even when he faced Red Leaf Great Master earlier, he was not so angry. He was so angry and enraged. Yang Hongwu had completely infuriated him. Boy, you're courting death. In that case, I'll fulfill your wish. Great Monarch Life and Death snorted coldly and grabbed out with his hand. A terrifying aura erupted as his hand instantly appeared in front of Yang Hongwu. Such power had locked onto Yang Hongwu. Yang Hongwu could not resist at all. In front of such a great power, his cultivation level was only at the level of a ruler. Even if he could fight against a Tao Lord or a Tao Master, he was still far from enough. His strength was still not enough to fight against a great Tao Master, let alone a universe overlord. Although Life and Death Great Master was a universe overlord whose cultivation level was far from its peak, his strength was still not something a great Tao Master could compete with. The difference in power was too great. They were not on the same level at all. A universe overlord, even if his cultivation level was less than 1/100th or even 1/1000 th of his prime, could easily kill a great being at the pinnacle of Great Tao Knight. Therefore, with Yang Hongwu's current cultivation base, there was no way he could withstand the Life and Death Grand Monarch's furious attack. Even though the speed of Life and Death Great Master's hand seemed to be extremely slow, Yang Hongwu could not avoid it. At this moment, Life and Death Great Master had sealed time and space, and the terrifying power of laws had completely sealed the space and time around Yang Hongwu. At such a level of cultivation, he did not need to use too many secret techniques to deal with warriors at Yang Hongwu's level. He could crush them with his own strength alone. Just as Yang Hongwu could only watch the big hand coming toward him, a voice rang out. At the same time, a ray of light blocked the attack of the big hand. Yang Hongwu was ready to activate the power in his body, but he did not expect that someone would block the terrible attack at this time. Stop. Of course, Yang Hongwu remembered this voice clearly. It was none other than the voice of Lu Yu's master, Furukura Daizuan. Life and death, great master. Do you want to die? Even if you want to die, don't do it here. You will destroy my side of the universe. Furukura Daizuan, it's not that I want to fight, but this little bastard is really too annoying. It's not that I don't want to give you face. Grand Monarch Life and Death took a deep breath when he saw Grand Monarch Ancient Desolation trying to stop him. He did not know what would happen if he hit Yang Hongwu. The power in this kid's body was really terrifying. His strength had not recovered yet. If he really faced that terrifying power, it was hard to say who would live and who would die. Moreover, he had a strong feeling. If that was really the case, he would be the one to die. This was what he was most afraid of. Now that Furukura Daizuan appeared and blocked his attack, Life and Death Great Master breathed a sigh of relief. Forget it. At this time, Furukura Daizuan was in a dilemma. After all, Life and Death Great Master was also a universe overlord. Although he had not recovered from his peak, his strength was still very strong. Once he recovered, he would have one more helper. After all, those who had besieged Life and Death Great Master were now his enemies. If Life and Death Great Master could recover, he would be able to share a lot of the pressure. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2211. River of Death, Saint Bone. Take this boy and leave this place quickly. I don't want to see him again. At this time, Life and Death Saint was really annoyed. Looking at Yang Hongwu made him feel annoyed. If he allowed him to stay here any longer, he was afraid that he would not be able to control the anger in his heart. This shocked Life and Death Great Master. He was, after all, a universe overlord, yet his state of mind was so unstable in front of a junior who was only a ruler. This boy was really not simple. Furukura Daizuan looked at Yang Hongwu and then at Life and Death Saint. He smiled bitterly in his heart. He knew very well that Yang Hongwu would not be willing to leave at this time. Furukura Daizuan also knew very well what he wanted. However, how could Life and Death Saint let Yang Hongwu enter the Life and Death Spring to temper his body so easily? It should be known that Yang Hongwu was not an ordinary person. Tempering his body required too much energy. Entering the Life and Death Spring was indeed the best way to do so. However, if he did so, half of the Life and Death Spring would be extracted by Yang Hongwu. This was very fatal for great sovereign life and death. No one would be willing to use their own life essence to help others cultivate. Even their own relatives would not do such a thing. Furthermore, Yang Hongwu and Grand Monarch Life and Death could be said to be enemies, out-and-out enemies. It was too unrealistic to let Life and Death Saint leave. However, Yang Hongwu did not want to leave at all. Judging from his expression, it seemed that he would not give up until he achieved his goal. In fact, to Furukura Daizuan, Yang Hongwu's potential was greater. However, it would take some time for Yang Hongwu to grow up. In contrast, Life and Death Saint was different. His potential and future strength were far inferior to Yang Hongwu's. However, Life and Death Saint's current strength was much stronger than that of Yang Hongwu. It could be said that as long as he had enough resources, he could recover to his peak in a very short time. However, Yang Hongwu could not do that. Therefore, this was a very difficult problem. However, after hesitating for a while, Furukura Daizuan made a choice. Yang Hongwu's current strength was not enough. However, if he were to fight against a universe overlord, he might have a chance of winning. If Yang Hongwu's strength could be improved to the level of Tao Lord, with the strength in his body, even if he could not fight against a universe overlord, he would be able to delay enough time and even injure the universe overlord. However, Great Exalted Life Death was currently unable to do so. Now that Great Sovereign Life and Death had scruples and fear in his heart, he no longer had the same impulse and fearlessness as before, because he had already died once. Now, he wanted to make a comeback. Senior. Yang Hongwu looked at Furukura Daizuan. If Furukura Daisuin wanted to fight, there was nothing he could do. Yang Hongwu could fight against life and death, saint with the strength in his body. However, if Furukura Daisuin joined the fight, there was absolutely no chance for him to win. You don't have to say it. I know. At this time, Furukura Daisuin's mind was on Yang Hongwu's side. Since he had made a choice, he would help Yang Hongwu. Once he asked, life and death saint would not be able to refuse. This was his universe, and life and death saint had no way to fight against him. If life and death saint really wanted to fight, he might cause some trouble for Furukura Daisuin. However, life and death saint had absolutely no chance of surviving. Furukura Daisuin was very confident about this. Similarly, life and death saint was also very clear about this at this moment. He felt very bitter in his heart. If it was before, he still had enough trump cards to fight against Furukura Daisuin. After all, Furukura Daisuin would not pay such a huge price to fight against him. However, the current variable was Yang Hongwu. Although this kid's cultivation seemed weak and was only in the sovereign realm, the strength in his body was really terrifying. Moreover, the most important point was that this kid's means were very strange. In addition to the strength in his body, there was something else that made him afraid. This thing was an existence that could restrain him. If Furukura Daisuin used Yang Hongwu's strength, life and death saint trump card would be nothing. At that time, he might not even be able to fight against Furukura Daisuin. He was very reluctant. But if Furukura Daisuin really asked to help Yang Hongwu, he really could not refuse. The only thing he could do was to get enough compensation from Furukura Daisuin. Thinking of this, life and death saint felt very sullen. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Furukura Daisuin, have you made your decision? Do you really want to do it? Life and death saint looked at Yang Hongwu. He had already seen through Furukura Daisuin's thoughts, so he asked directly, life and death, you should know how important this kid is to me. Furukura Daisuin shook his head. My strength alone is too weak. Even if I add you, it won't be enough. There are too many variables in the future. I need a stronger helper, an expert who can surpass you and me. Otherwise, we won't be able to deal with that huge disaster. All right, since you have already made your decision, I won't force you. However, I can agree to his conditions. I don't need 1/10 of his luck. I want the sacred river of death, Saint Bone. Life and Death Saint looked at Yang Hongwu and then at Furukura Daisuin. Supreme, venerate, ancient desolation frowned when he heard this. Although he had estimated that he would have to pay a certain price, he hadn't expected that what the Supreme Venerate Life Death wanted was the sacred bone of death. The sacred river of death Saint Bone was useless to ordinary people. However, it was very useful to great beings at the universe overlord level. The sacred river of death Saint Bone was a section of the spine of the ancient universe overlord, the sacred river of death Saint Bone. The spine of a universe overlord wasn't much. If it was only the spine of an ordinary universe overlord, it would be useful to other universe overlords, but it wouldn't be of much use. On the contrary, it was very useful to some great path knights, as it could help them comprehend the great path of the universe. However, the sacred river of death Saint Bone was different. The great path that great Master Death Saint Bone comprehended was a fatal threat to cultivators below the universe overlord level. If one wasn't at the universe overlord level and dared to comprehend the sacred river of death Saint Bone, he would be courting death. However, for universe overlords, the great path contained in the sacred river of death Saint Bone was very frightening. If one could comprehend it, he would definitely become an invincible overlord. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 22:12. Qian. In fact, although Furukura Daisuin had this piece of Death River Saint Bone, it was impossible for him to comprehend any great Tao from it. How could it be so easy to comprehend the great Tao of Death River? Rumor had it that the undefeated grand, exalted dead river from back then was actually still alive. Thus, he had deliberately left his remains behind. However, Even if he couldn't comprehend any great Tao of the universe from this piece of Death River Saintbone, he could still find some inheritance of Great Master Death River. Great Master Death River was an overlord. The inheritance of an invincible overlord was naturally sought after by everyone, including great beings at the universe overlord level. Every universe overlord wanted to become an invincible overlord. There were even rumors that Great Master Death River wasn't dead. Instead, he had surpassed the universe overlord level and entered a higher realm. Hence, anything belonging to Great Master Death River was extremely precious and was something that all universe overlords fought over. Furukura Daizuin had, of course, paid a hefty price to obtain this piece of Death River Saintbone. He had studied it for a long time, but he didn't gain anything from it in the end. Speaking of which, this thing was equivalent to a chicken rib. However, he couldn't bear to give it to someone else. This time, Great Master Life and Death proposed to exchange the Death River Saintbone for Yang Hongwu's opportunity to enter the Life and Death Spring to cultivate and refine his body. Furukura Daizuin hesitated for a while, but agreed in the end. The inheritance of Great Master Death River in the Death River Saintbone was, after all, an illusory thing. Besides, even if he found the place of inheritance of Great Master Death River, he might not be able to obtain it. No universe overlord level great beings would give their inheritance to other universe overlords. They would leave it for the person they were waiting for. Therefore, how could their inheritance be snatched away by others? Even if they were lucky enough to obtain the inheritance, they would have to pay a huge price. This was why Furukura Daizuin was willing to give up the Death River Saintbone. Sure, if you want the holy bone of Death River, I can give it to you. Furukura Daizuin looked at Grand Monarch Life and Death and said, however, you cannot restrict Yang Hongwu while he is tempering his body. Seeing that Furukura Daizuin had agreed, the corners of Great Sovereign Life and Death's mouth curved into a smile. For him, the Life and Death Spring was indeed his source of origin. However, Yang Hongwu was merely a sovereign realm cultivator. His cultivation level was still too low. Moreover, how could a spring of life and death be so easy to refine? He could enter the spring of life and death to temper his body. Even if Yishiwen didn't restrict him, he might not be able to truly refine the source of the spring of life and death. Yishiwen didn't do anything, but the spring of life and death wasn't an inanimate object. It had its own consciousness. With his control, it was impossible for others to devour the source of the life and death spring and counterattack. If Yang Hongwu didn't seize the opportunity and was devoured by the spring of life and death instead, he couldn't blame Yishiwen. Taking a step back, even if a part of the spring of life and death's origin had been refined and devoured by that kid, as long as he could refine the Death River Sacred Bone, it would be enough to replenish the lost origin. He might even have the chance to obtain Supreme Sovereign Death River's inheritance. Yishiwen could even obtain the great Tao of the universe to comprehend it. As long as Yishiwen could comprehend the great Tao of the Holy Bone of Death River, the loss of a little bit of source was absolutely worth it. Yishiwen could recover his source, but the great Tao of the universe of the universe of the universe of the universe was absolutely something that could only be encountered and not sought. If Yishiwen could comprehend it, his strength would increase tremendously, and he might even become an invincible overlord. Therefore, Great Sovereign Life and Death wasn't worried at all. However, he still needed Furukura Daizuin's protection now. After all, he didn't have enough strength now. His strength hadn't recovered, and he couldn't resist his previous enemies. If he lost Furukura Daizuin's protection, he wouldn't be able to protect himself, let alone make a comeback. Therefore, he couldn't fall out with Furukura Daizuin now. He had to rely on Yishiwen's strength to recover his cultivation and have a chance to rise again. Therefore, since Furukura Daizuin wanted to protect Yang Hongwu and help him improve his cultivation, Great Sovereign Life and Death River wouldn't be so stupid. Master Life and Death wasn't stupid enough to target Yang Hongwu at this time. Moreover, Yang Hongwu's background must be very amazing. Even Master Life and Death himself could feel the tyrannical and terrifying power in Yang Hongwu's body. It was definitely a terrifying expert. Yishuan didn't know if it was the power left behind by the person behind to protect him, or if it was his own power. If it was his own power, then it was too terrifying. He must be an invincible overlord-level expert. If he really stimulated that power, great sovereign life and death would be the end of him. Thinking of this, great sovereign life and death felt relieved. He didn't care about Yang Hongwu anymore, even if Yang Hongwu had taken away his opportunity and disrupted his plan. Yang Hongwu, go to the life and death spring. Furukura Daizuan said to Yang Hongwu at this time. Although Yang Hongwu couldn't hear the deal between Furukura Daizuan and great sovereign life and death, he could imagine that Furukura Daizuan must have paid a price to obtain the opportunity to temper his body in the life and death spring. Although he didn't know what the price was, he was sure that it wasn't simple. No matter what Furukura Daizuan thought of him, at least he was indebted to him now. It was the same before. If it weren't for Furukura Daizuan, he would have suffered a great loss. The loss wasn't small. No matter what, Yang Hongwu accepted this favor. He would find an opportunity to return it in the future. Moreover, Furukura Daizuan was Liu Yu's master. This was also a favor. Therefore, Yang Hongwu now owed Furukura Daizuan a lot of favors. Thank you, senior. Yang Hongwu said. You don't have to be so polite. For me, this is just a small matter. You are also someone that Liu Yu values, and also someone that I value. I hope you can work hard and reach that height as soon as possible. Your future opponents won't be weak. Furukura Daizuan patted Yang Hongwu's shoulder and said. Yang Hongwu nodded and flew directly to the life and death spring. At this time, the life and death spring opened and Yang Hongwu smoothly entered it. The life and death spring determines life and death. If you can't withstand the impact of the life and death spring and can't transform, then you will die in it. You have to be clear about this. Great sovereign life and death said at this time. Although I am the Lord of the life and death spring. Lord, if you can't withstand it, I can't save you. Even Furukura Daizuan can't save you. You have to understand this. Thank you for your reminder, senior. Boy, take care of yourself. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.